And I gotta wonder how delayed this is. Because we're technically live right now, but I don't know if it's like... Actually... Oh, yeah, it is.
Oh, we're
Yep,
okay.
we're on. We're on
Yay.
YouTube. So, I mean, if anybody's here, it says we have 2 people waiting. But I bet you one of them is me because I have it on another monitor right now.
I wonder who the other could possibly be.
That's a good question. If you're in chat, let us know. But I'm Poke. I'm an artist. You guys know that already.
And me.
That's him.
Yeah, you know how it is.
All right. So Pink has some videos that we can watch real quick.
Yeah, I had some that we could possibly look at. I kind of figured it'd be kind of funny to watch one of What If Alt Hiss
Oh
little
my.
one of his little shitty videos.
All right.
Let me see if I can find a decent one. And then there's also combating the narrative if we just want to listen to some fucking neo-Nazi rant.
We'll see how the stream goes because that's always fun too. Send me the links and I'll put them in.
Yeah, I'm trying to find a decent one because like a lot of What If Alt Hiss are just fucking stupid. Here, we could do the classic his 12 lies about reality thing. Here you go.
Let's see. That's all halfway through. Hold up. Let's do theater mode and see how that looks. Oh, it's not too bad. All right.
I talk a lot. It's a bit surprising given I'm an introvert, but I'm generally talking about abstract concepts for 3 in this permanent state of
I
argument.
don't know. Should I give context behind this guy, or are we just gonna jump right into it?
I mean, you can if you want.
Because like, fuck, how did I find this guy? It was when I was in my fucking modern philosophy class, and I had to do like a discussion board post on some random stupid shit, and then this guy popped up in my recommended, and I ended up watching this video. And I brought it to class the next day, and I talked about, and it was also on my discussion board post for that class, but I talked about how fucking stupid this shit was. This dude's nuts. Oh god, we actually do have someone here.
Hell yeah.
Isn't he the German guy?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah, so this guy opens up this video. Here, you could take it back and play it again because he talks about how like I think his immediate thing is how good he is at arguments and how he has a lot of arguments that he always wins and stumps people in.
Yeah.
And then he posts these.
I remember that, and then we paused it and read all these, and it was like they were just talking at each other.
Yeah, they're really just talking.
Let's see.
The thinker.
The thinker.
I talk a lot. It's a bit surprising given I'm an introvert, but I'm generally talking about abstract concepts for 3 or 4 hours a day. In this permanent state of arguing with other people, I've found some patterns. I'm just going to warn you, this isn't your average What If Altist video. This is a video with the mistakes and patterns I see in how people often view the world. All of these myths or lies about reality go into various ideas impregnated into our heads by the cultures we live in. This is basically a philosophy video if you haven't already figured it out. And I'm not a philosopher, and philosophy actually
Pink is.
Yeah, it should.
But I really want to
the
make
fuck
this
I am.
the friends who are skilled in other fields like
It's funny how much more nervous
generally
fucking
found
YouTube makes me than doing the radio.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I did
the
one podcast and that you watched that one time. Oh, this guy actually knows What If Alt Hiss. Yeah, dude,
Oh,
this
good.
guy's a fucking. I hate this dude. I'm waiting for him to get to his points because like his lies are like progress is inherent, which I mean, fair enough. Progress isn't really like a thing depending on how you look at it, but like, you know, it's true enough to say that progress isn't inherent depending on how you define it. But then he says some shit like Christianity and the Western ideology gave oh, what's his argument? Yeah, he goes, Christianity and the Western ideology invented the concept of time going forward, and before that, every view is cyclical, and therefore that allowed progress to start, and there wasn't progress before that.
I remember him saying that too. I remember him saying something like, "Yeah, all cultures before Christianity came along believed that time was cyclical, so they never did anything new. They never innovated." And I'm like, but you know, people discovered agriculture and metallurgy. Like, did they not?
That's not. I guess that's not progress.
I guess
writing, advanced cultural techniques, the Roman concrete. None of that was progress.
Literally, in the invention of writing itself, not progress.
Anything the Chinese ever did, not progress. They're not Christian. Only Christians do progress. Canada's gonna fall, and the U.S. is gonna slurp it up.
I mean, they tried to. They tried to once already.
During the revolution in 1812.
Mm-hmm.
Did we end up buying any water, by the way?
No,
we still didn't. Out?
No, we're still
Son
out.
of a bitch.
I'm gonna keep it playing. If you want me to pause at any time, just let me know.
All in a permanent state of being wrong. I just don't know how I'm wrong. These points aren't in any particular order, so let's get started.
Oh, his dumbass intro too.
It's very difficult to be wise. Philosophers have spent thousands of years thinking about this, and of all those philosophers, few were more successful than Confucius. In fact, I was just watching an interesting documentary at Confucius called Confucius, Creator of the Golden Rule. It talked about Confucius's life.
Oh, he's a sponsored.
To be a huge influence.
It's a sponsor.
This is a sponsorship.
I forgot this guy was fucking sponsored.
Oh my god. All right, let's skip his Magellan TV ad.
1. Progress is inherent.
All right, here's his first one.
Yeah,
progress.
This the immediate first
inherent.
point.
All right, so these are 12 lies about reality. Progress is inherent.
Which, like I said, is true enough. Progress, depending on how you define it, either does or does not actually exist. It's it's very subjective what progress is. But kind of going with the way I assume this guy thinks of and defines progress, yeah, it's not inherent. He'd probably look at the fall of the Roman Empire and say that was a decline in progress. Progress went backwards.
Mm-hmm.
But then we get to the Christian part. I just need to hear him say it.
Seeing the geopolitics part of this channel, my predictions for the future really aren't optimistic. We're at the end of a secular
Oh my god, doesn't he cite himself as a source? He cites his own alternate history as a source for why he's right about what would happen if Germany won World War II or some shit like that.
Yeah, pause it. Yeah, he ends up citing one of his own videos of alternate history where he basically goes, in my alternate history video blank, I showed that China, I don't think it was China, but it was some fucking country. China ruled the world. Therefore, and then he makes a whole point out of that as if that's actually anything. And then what he just talked about right there is he mentioned that he has a belief in cyclical cycles of history.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
he believes in cycles of history, which is like a discounted fucking belief from the early 1900s. It's just a bunch of fucking bullshit. History doesn't really go in cycles. It just kind of looks at it that way if that's what you're looking for, and you only look at Europe.
Isn't he like a structuralist, too?
Uh-huh.
Because he reads a lot of structuralist books. And then
most of the books he cites,
he cites them a lot in his videos.
Most of the books he cites in these videos are from like 1950s and prior. He doesn't like to cite many modern historians, and the ones he does cite are usually people who are carrying on like largely discounted theories from like the 1800s, like cycles of history.
It's so funny. All right, let's keep going.
A lot of plagues, religious fanaticism, and war, to say the least. However, when I talk about this to non-history buffs, they often find it ridiculous. I've heard
let's see what this is. Me trying to predict the future, or we'll have some plagues, big wars, economic collapses, and religious fanaticism. Oh, that sounds horrifying. Oh, I thought that sounded pretty good by history standards.
Not really sure what that means because all of those things happen throughout.
Yeah, they all happen.
Confused there.
I don't. Yeah, that's kind of like a big nothing burger.
Don't happen anymore. Empires can't exist anymore. It seems like even the idea that we'll have
anyone who thinks that empires can't exist anymore doesn't know what an empire is.
To most people. However, if we look at the historical record, this clearly isn't the case.
We were having that conversation yesterday about what an empire is.
Yeah, talking to Sachi. Because his idea was that it was more about like the actual direct ownership of territory rather than the exploitation of territory for the imperial core of the home country.
Mm-hmm. Or even just like you said, the benefit of the imperial core. Even if it's not directly like territorial gains, it's still domination by one power over another.
Yeah, it's a foreign power it's a power going into foreign lands, subjugating their people, and using that subjugation to effectively extract resources and pump them into the enrichment of the home country, or the imperial core.
Pretty simple definition of an empire, I think.
Mass death. It gets even funnier when you consider that other eras in history consider themselves as the veritable end of history, with future wars and horror never occurring after them. People in the era before World War
See, I gotta ask about that, because he goes, previous eras of history consider themselves to be the end of history, where there would be nothing after that. And I kind of wonder, I mean, maybe we could look at his source there, but I kind of wonder what the fuck he's talking about. Maybe, like, during World War I, when everyone thought that war was so terrible there wouldn't be another war. But that's, like, one example. Like, I'm really trying to think about, like, what the fuck could he possibly be talking about? Because there was a bit of that in the 1800s and early 1900s, but like prior to that, I kind of struggle to think of a time where, like, maybe during the Pax Romana, but like the Roman citizens who would have thought that would have just been wrong, because the whole time during the Pax Romana there was constant border wars and skirmishes going on, so it's like it's not even a thing that actually happened. It just meant peace in Rome itself, not for the outer areas.
Yeah, that's a funny thing when people say, like, oh, history ended, there's no more things happening. But it's like, maybe for like your local area, like maybe in the imperial core, but if you look at the rest of the world, shit's still happening.
And it's like the end of history idea came about from I forget the guy's name. It's like Fukushima, who wrote he wrote a paper in I think the 80s or 90s talking about how the advent of neoliberalism and global capitalism would effectively make it so that countries couldn't go to war with each other because it wouldn't be economically viable anymore. Evidently proven false. That wasn't a real idea. But like that idea of the end of history being a thing only comes about in the 80s and 90s. As far as I'm aware, that's like when the first like concept of it comes about. So even then, I'm like, what the fuck is he talking about? Like, not even the people in World War I thought it was the end of history. As far as I'm aware, they simply assumed that war was so terrible that we would have to stop doing wars. And those people, I would say, were just kind of really, really dumbly optimistic.
And even then, the end of war doesn't mean the end of history. It's like, you can have history without war.
No.
I guess not.
We're over forever. And right before the fall of Rome, the Romans thought the idea of the Roman Empire ever collapsing was ridiculous.
He immediately cites Rome.
And then
I gotta wonder what he means by right before the collapse, because the collapse didn't just like
it didn't just happen one day. It was very gradual.
It was like it was like a 500-year process of decline, then gradual collapse, the splitting up of the empire, and then when we have the classic 476 collapse of the Roman Empire, it obviously doesn't even collapse then. It still existed. We just called it Byzantium.
Because apparently the only part of Rome that's actually Roman is the west part. The other half of Rome, that's not Rome anymore. That became something else, but they still called themselves Romans and they still use the same government.
But yeah, no, I really wonder if he has a citation for like Romans thinking this and where they were would be my question, because I bet you they're probably just like random people in Rome who don't know what's going on the border.
Unfortunately, none of his sources are in the description here.
No, he doesn't put them in the description. He has them up on the video. So if you take it back, he had a source on the right side of the screen. It was just a book.
Yeah.
One, for example, thought major wars were over forever. And right before the fall of Rome, the Romans thought the idea of the Roman Empire ever collapsing was ridiculous. In 18th century Western...
there's no source there.
Yeah,
okay.
There's no source.
...was taboo, while mass bombings were the norm of the 20th. Your average European peasant lived a far better life in the 15th century than the mid-19th.
There's more secular histories.
Of living before the Industrial
Will Durant, old historian.
A common person after 600 BC in the Middle East and 800 AD in China. If we look at an alternate history perspective, if literally anyone
here we go.
The United States
oh my God.
came out on top in the 20th century, we'd be living in a horrifying Orwellian world today.
Your source for that is literally yourself. Your source.
Yeah, he goes, if we...
It's the fucking dumbest thing ever.
He literally goes, if we look at my alternative history video about what if the U.S. Well, actually, you know, the video he cites on screen is what if Japan invaded the Soviet Union? Like that would fucking... That's another one. I gotta get back to that one. But so he goes, yeah, if you watch my video about what would happen if literally anyone other than the United States, France, or the UK came out on top, then you'd realize blah, 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 blah. So he's citing his own alt history video. Yeah, it's really a came in a dream kind of citation. It's really funny. And then, yeah, I love this. What if Japan invaded the Soviet Union timeline and somehow Japan conquers the Soviet Union and China? Bro, they were already losing the war in China before they attacked the United States.
But you see,
like they weren't winning that war.
But you see,
how the fuck are they going to invade the Soviet Union?
Well, you see, if they didn't have to send so many resources over to fight the Americans, they could just focus all that on the Soviet Union and China. They would totally defeat the combined forces of the Kuomintang and the Chinese Communist Party at that point.
I guess, yeah. After. Meanwhile, a decent amount of Stalin's forces at the beginning of World War II were in Siberia against the Japanese. Because, you know, they had a war previously with the Japanese in, I think, 1917?
It was before World War One.
Yeah, the Russo-Japanese War, so... Before? Really?
Yeah,
okay.
it was. I think it was like right before World War One, and it was like a huge
humiliation
you're right.
for
the Tsar.
You're right, because I remember what the fuck is his face? Dan Carlin cites a bunch of reporters who were watching that in anticipation of what the next war would look like. But yeah, so a bunch of Stalin's forces at the beginning of World War II were in Siberia, ready to go against the Japanese because they saw the Japanese as being one of their enemies, and Stalin didn't really think that like Hitler would invade him right away, so he had less defenses. It's the reason that Barbarossa was so successful at first, is that they caught the Soviet Union off guard. But in this idea, like, you think Japan's just gonna have an easy time walking into Siberia where most of the units were and Stalin was prepared for an attack from, while they're also losing a war in China, being cut off from resources by the United States thanks to the oil embargo? How does this work? What if Japan had... Maybe we need to watch that one and figure out how the fuck he thinks any of this works.
I was thinking that too. I was like, I want to watch this source video and see what his argument for is how Japan ends up conquering all of East Asia. Like, I really want to know.
Apparently they didn't get all of China.
No, they just left a little bit in the middle there.
Yeah, I wonder why that middle bit is left.
It's like their Chinese puppet state, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, what's up with that?
Yeah, I do kind of want to watch this now. But let's get through a little bit more of this, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Which brings us to the main point about progress. That without Western...
Oh yeah, here we go. Pause this.
Jeez.
I mean, he's about to say it, so we're going to have to take it back to hear him say it. But I just want to read this. Let me explain this one. Most religions in history, including modern Eastern ones like Buddhism, Hinduism, and Confucianism, have no understanding of linear time. In these societies, the most important thing is maintaining the ancestral traditions. However, between God creating the world, the fall from Eden, prophets like Jesus and Muhammad, and Revelation, Christianity and Islam are weird for having a progressive linear view of time built in, that of mankind gaining greater maturity and thus more worthy of God's love. For reasons we will talk about later, Islam was worse than Christianity at achieving this, despite the Golden Age. But I believe you would call this, he's just talking out of his ass. What the fuck? I love this idea that, like, Christianity invented the idea of forward progress, which is just asinine. Like, I get that, like, other cultures, especially in places like India, and some Native American religions had, like, cyclical views of time, but that doesn't stop them from, like, thinking that progress can still, like, you can still get from point A to point B within that cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what in the fuck even is that idea? You think the Greeks also had a cyclical, quote unquote, view of time. I would say if you look at the way their myths work, like in the Hesiod, where man is created and then destroyed, and then created and then destroyed, and when they finally get to modern man, we're like made out of stone and therefore really shit. First man was made out of gold, but they melted, I think. I forget how the whole myth goes. But, like, so that would be like a cyclical view of time in the same way that Hinduism is, because Hinduism has the same thing where the world will get created and then, come back. I don't really know how Confucianism's cyclical. Kind of confused as to how that works. But the Greeks had a cyclical view of time, and yet they still did progress. They still invented technology. They explored. They colonized Sicily. Kind of influenced the way that the Roman Empire would later work. Also, borrowing from the same myth, had a cyclical view of time. It's just what the fuck are you talking about? There was no progress before Christianity. Take it back so we can hear him say it too, because he says it more plainly than it's actually written on the screen.
World today. Which brings us to the main point about progress, that without Western civilization and stuff like the Industrial Revolution, it would just be entirely absent. Christianity gave the West the idea that progress existed at all.
Christianity gave the West the idea that progress existed at all.
Well, citation?
Yeah, and also, what does progress mean, man? Is it not progress for the Greeks to, invent writing? They created their own form of writing.
Or anything the Chinese did, any of their inventions, any of their innovations on the way that the Chinese empire and state works, none of that counts. Nothing the Japanese did, nothing any of the Africans did, the metallurgy in Nigeria. No, none of that's progress. Nothing that the irrigation techniques that the Native Americans figured out to farm corn, that's not progress either. None of that's progress. They weren't Christian. They're all heathens.
They can't have progress. He's already assumed that progress is a Christian invention.
Dude, it's so weird. I don't understand how this guy considers himself to be an amateur historian type. Mm-hmm. He's willing to make alternate history videos.
Historian.
Yeah, armchair historian, amateur historian type. And then he's just going to completely ignore all of history and all of the things we could consider to be progress before Christianity and just say that it was entirely absent.
I wonder if he conflates progress and inventing things as something someone is the very first in history to do something. I don't know, because he doesn't ever really. I don't think he ever really defines progress really well. The way I imagine what progress means is just kind of improving the living standards of people over time, and just kind of developing ways so people can live longer, live healthier, live better lives. That's that's what progress means.
Now I can. Are you here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so I guess
minor internet hiccups.
Yeah, we had our internet out all night last night from fucking 6 o'clock, maybe 4 o'clock actually. I think it went out at 4 o'clock and it didn't come back until 8:30. So that was 8:30 a.m. 4 o'clock p.m. to 8:30 a.m., which is a lot of fun on a Friday night when you can't really do anything. But I guess
it wasn't too bad.
Yeah, no, I'm just over exaggerating.
We had a hot spot.
Yeah. Anyway,
I'm surprised it's still wigging out, considering that
there it goes again.
There's not any stormy cloud heard, but that's kind of lame. I was responding. Oh, is it? God damn it.
Yeah.
I guess the streaming is a little intense for the.
Well, I mean, it was doing fine. I think it's honestly just internet issues with this.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Let's see. Maybe we have a connection again. Let's continue. Where were we? Talking about progress?
I was trying to respond to. Oh God, now I gotta try to fucking read this name. Uruguay. That's my best attempt. It honestly looks like Luigi with a UR in front of it, like Luigi. But he plays progress. Yeah, as far as I'm aware, he doesn't actually ever define progress in this, but I'm assuming. Hopefully, this is going to be caught this time. I don't know how much of this was caught last time, but I'm assuming he means the standard definition you run into of progress, where it's essentially any tool, invention, innovation that makes your life easier. or going from, and like I said, all subjective, of course, like a bad government, like an autocratic king, to like a good government, like democracy. That's usually also like lumped in with progress.
Mm-hmm. But
so that's what I'm assuming what it means. But yeah, I don't think he actually ever defines progress.
Yeah, I mean, if it's in that case with a governmental change, I guess China didn't make any progress because they were always just a monarchy for like 5,000 years.
Yeah, none of their legal innovations or anything like that counts because they stayed emperor. They stayed autocratic. So no progress. Also, they weren't Christian, which of course, according to him, is when progress like was itself invented. Progress was invented with Jesus.
Yeah, I don't really know how that works either.
Because it wasn't cyclical, because there's like an end of days, unlike every other religion where they still have the end of days, but like reality just restarts after that. You know, that doesn't count, and you can't make progress within that time frame because you know the reality is going to start after that. So I guess there's no point in inventing anything. The Aztecs, with their cyclical view of history, didn't do anything. There was no irrigation systems or their pyramid structure. None of that was progress.
Well, then I'm kind of confused. Like, how can you make progress even in a Christian worldview? Because the earth is going to be destroyed anyway. And then, the kingdom of God comes down.
I was going to say, and theoretically, reality kind of, quote unquote, restarts because you end up being raised and you go into the paradise and kingdom of heaven.
Yeah.
So I honestly, you're right. His logic can apply as much to like Christian and Abrahamic worldviews as it can to non-Abrahamic worldviews. So basically, he's just
talking out of his ass. Good old what if alt hist.
The other main civilizations like China, India, or Rome thought time was cyclical, with empires rising and falling.
Oh, he put up another. Yeah.
The West is strange in that every century since the 10th, it has been more technologically advanced than the last. This has been part of it. Oh, this has been part of an attitudes and internal social structure in the West. For example,
the internet went out.
The effect. Really?
Yeah, it's going out again.
God damn it.
It's back now.
But you can still hear me.
Yeah, I mean, it was cutting out, though. Just keep going.
For example, the exact same event, the Black Death, had the effect in the Islamic and Hindu civilizations of resulting in social conservatism and repression and economic stagnation. Citation. Meanwhile, the Black Death in the West resulted in the Renaissance and massive economic growth. However, for consistent increases in standard of living, you have to wait for the Industrial Revolution to improve productivity faster than population growth. Okay, so he's going off of like standards of living and stuff. Even if you do go off of that, there was still progress before Christianity due to the irrigation systems and shit that I keep mentioning. Government structures, societies, building walls around your city so it makes it harder to conquer. That's progress. That increases the standard of living. You're less likely to have fucking people come set your shit on fire.
I mean, yeah, sure, it's not as like great of a standard of living increase as we get after the Industrial Revolution. Yeah.
But it is an increase.
Yeah, it's still an increase, man.
It completely goes against the idea that he said that it was entirely absent. And then, the Black. I wonder if he will expand on how the Black Death led to the Renaissance. Wait, no, hold up. Sorry, when he said that, I thought. I read Renaissance and I thought end of feudalism because the Black Death did kind of contribute to the end of feudalism and like the advent of guilds and shit in the Middle Ages, because essentially, as the idea goes, the massive dying off of a bunch of the serfs and peasants in Europe made each one of them more valuable to the landlords and gave them effectively like more bargaining power in the feudal market of the time. So people were much more likely to leave and be free, and as a result, the feudal landlords had to give concessions to the peasants, leading effectively to the end of feudalism in a while. The Renaissance in Italy, however, was, at least to my understanding, the modern historical consensus is essentially caused by the collapse of the Byzantine Empire. Because once the Byzantine Empire fell, a bunch of... I didn't read that. It's okay. I didn't say who said that, so you're in the clear at least.
I was gonna say his name, but I chose not
Don't.
to.
Yeah. I guess we'll move on. Yeah, it's probably Spectrum still trying to fucking fix the Wi-Fi. I'm sure they're still having issues with it after the storm.
Mm-hmm.
Do we just keep chugging along?
Yeah, why not? I don't know how watchable this is for the chat, so let us know how these lag spikes are looking to you guys.
We just got the two peeps right now, Furby and Ruigi.
That's fine.
As far as I'm aware.
Audience members are audience members. All right, let's keep going.
Never moving forward. With the concept of progress, the West actually tried to achieve it, which did actually result in progress. The lives of a modern
what does
West
that even mean?
now were immeasurably
okay.
And then he cites a GDP.
Oh yeah, GDP.
Look,
line go up.
Line go up. It went all the way up.
Line go up. Yeah, GDP is a really... It's funny that he cited living standards earlier, and then he cites GDP as evidence of progress. Because GDP doesn't measure living standards. It's just how much shit is being made in a country. Which, that's great if you're trying to find out how productive a country is. But it doesn't tell you anything about the actual living standards within that country. So citing it here is kind of stupid unless your idea of progress is production increased. We were able to make more things. Like, yeah, the Industrial Revolution allowed us to produce like really nice cloth and shit, but it also like resulted in a ton of people getting a shit ton more diseases that didn't exist beforehand. Yeah, basically, number goes up, therefore gooder.
I love that line.
It's literally it. It's so ridiculous.
Look, here's progress right there. You see the line went up. That's progress.
Progress is when you can make 5 times as many shirts as before, but 3 kids a year or 3 kids a month lose their hands in tailor shops.
Dude,
That's progress.
Did you see all that progress Germany made during the Weimar Republic when they had tons of increase in GDP? They had like millions and millions. Every citizen had millions of marks. That's tons.
Hoi 4 gaming.
He's a lines on maps kind of person. That's the only kind of like exposure to history he has, is just like he looks at maps and he watches the funny lines change around.
He reads the historians from the 50s, and then that's all you need. Fuck everyone who's modern. Screw him.
Yeah, he plays Hoi 4 and fucking CK2, and that's where he gets his history.
Bro seems like it. Can you actually?
What's up?
Can you take it back a little bit? I heard him say something I wanted to respond to.
Yeah.
Never moving forward. With the concept of progress, the West actually tried to achieve it, which...
Oh yeah, right there. Pause that. What does that mean? With the concept of progress, the West actually tried to achieve it. So like, I want to know how he thinks that works. Did like all of Western Europe come together and be like, all right, guys, we got to start doing progress now? Because like saying they actively tried to achieve it means that it was something done like as an intentionally. Like it was manifest destiny, like there was this big ideology across Europe of like, okay, we got to go do this thing. I don't think there was. He may be thinking about like the advent of like science, and how like being a scientist like became like a position you can do, and you strive to like learn things about the natural world as much as possible. But that existed before Christianity. That's what philosophers were doing. That's what the like Indian Buddhists, when they were having arguments with the Greeks about how movement originated and whether or not there was our first mover or not. That's what that was. Like, sure, it's quote unquote primitive. Like they didn't know about atoms and shit. They weren't like examining material reality, but they were doing the same thing, trying to understand as much about the natural world as possible. Like that's not something that Jesus and like the Apostle Paul invented. What the fuck?
No, not at all.
I mean, it's not like one day Thomas Aquinas was sitting there in his fucking castle and he's like, bro, what if we started like making progress?
Yeah, what if we just started making progress and increasing living standards? We should do that.
Yeah, dude, the fucking Chinese are just sitting there doing the same thing they've been doing since the beginning of time. There's been no changes. They're still like nomads.
Yeah, I was going to say that's another good point. If no other civilization aside from Christian civilization ever invented the concept of progress, why aren't all other human civilizations still hunter-gatherers? Yeah. Like every other single civilization should just be hunter-gatherers at that point, because they never progress past that. But they're not, obviously.
There was no progress. I love this fucking video. This is just the first point out of his 12 lies about reality. And most of them are like this, where it's like you can read like the initial idea, I think one of the later ones is like there is no black and white, there is no good and evil in history. Like, true. Yeah, I agree with that. And then, he says a bunch of stupid shit in the middle of it to try to explain his view, and it's like, okay, man, now that I understand what you mean, you're kind of dumb.
It's usually how it goes with him. It's like he says some like on the surface kind of like understandable thing, but then he'll explain it further, and you just kind of go, "Oh, you're crazy."
Yeah.
Oh, you don't actually know what you're talking about. Okay.
Result in progress. The lives of a modern Westerner now were immeasurably
better
than any other era before the late 20th.
Also, I like how progress and the benefits of progress only get to apply to Westerners.
Of course,
because no other civilization achieves progress or increased living standards. Never.
Yeah, and all of that totally depends on how you view these things, because, and I wouldn't say this is just like a blanket like absolutely true thing, but like depending on what stats you're using to measure living standards, how you want to view that. Most indigenous societies have higher quote unquote living standards than the West does. They work less. There's more free time. There's more recreation. They're not as stressed. They just don't live as long. Mostly because they don't, a lot of these native societies don't have like really strong medicine like penicillin. They do have medicine, of course. We have the archaeological evidence of like Neanderthals and shit, like repairing broken legs and still living within a society despite having a disability in the quote unquote primitive era.
And aren't there aren't there groups of African people who chew on coca leaves because it is actually like a pain reliever?
No, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is like indigenous medicine's like a real thing.
Because those plants do things, and people are smart enough to figure that out for themselves.
Yeah, it's
not that groundbreaking of a revelation. I don't know. It's so funny when I hear shit like that, where especially from Altus, What If Altus, where he just goes, only Western civilization could ever produce the concept of progress. That's why we have so much progress in the West.
Yeah.
It's totally not because we exploited most of the other planet in order to enrich ourselves. We're just inherently better because we're Westerners.
Yeah. And, like I said, even the whole living standard thing, it depends on what stats you look at and which ones you want to use to measure, because in some respects we're better, or, better than indigenous societies, and in some respects we're worse. Mm-hmm. We work a lot more. We have a lot more stress than they do. But hey, some of our life expectancies are higher, although they're on the decline right now. Oops.
Uh-oh. And then, all those countries that don't know how to do progress are currently going up.
Yeah. And my point here isn't that like indigenous people have like better lives than Western people. I'm just saying that it's not something you could just stamp this X is better than Y. It depends on what things you look at and what things you value and how you want to look at it. It's a subjective concept. So you can't just go immeasurably better than any other era before the late 20th century, because it depends on how you mean and where in the world you're looking and who you're looking at. It's not just something that like is just factually true.
Mm-hmm. It's a very subjective thing.
It's a very subjective thing, and subjectively, I would agree. I do think, generally speaking, human lives are better now than they used to be. But that's because I'm looking at certain metrics. I could look at other metrics and come to the exact opposite conclusion. But I'm looking at life expectancy, general comfort, death by disease. That kind of stuff has gone down. Less people are literally slaves than they were in the past. That kind of stuff is obviously, at least in my opinion, better. But it's not something you could just go, that's it, final, done, right?
Yeah, it's. Like you said, it's subjective and it's still currently ongoing. It's we haven't completely gotten rid of slavery yet. We're working on it maybe, but that's one thing that would increase the living standards of tons of people.
Yeah, but living standards only count in Western countries.
Yeah, they only count for the Westerners.
Century. However, this has let us forget this is all still an illusion. If communist China, the Soviet Union...
The thing about modernity is humanity has gotten more powerful, and for relatively good countries like the US or France, the results can be amazing. Relatively good countries? However, for evil ones like Nazi Germany or Communist China, the results can be dystopian. I like how we all know Germany killed a bunch of people. Very bad thing. And then for China, he just shows a fucking pole with security cameras on it. That, we have those in America,
too. They're the surveillance state.
They're the surveillance state.
In all fairness, the Chinese Communist Party did kill a lot of people through the landlord genocide, which, depending on your perspective, but they killed a lot of people during the landlord genocide, and then obviously the Great Leap Forward killed who knows how many million people in the massive famine.
Yeah.
But the difference between China and Nazi Germany is that China wasn't trying to kill 80, random number out there. The thing I always see is like 60 to 80 million, but I think that's on the high end. Mm-hmm. But they weren't trying to kill 60 to 80 million people in an intentional famine. It was a mistake due to it was like the idea that sparrows were a pest, and it turns out that they were actually like one of the most beneficial seed carriers for China at the time, and it resulted in a huge famine.
Yeah, they were a huge pollinator for crops, and so when China killed all their sparrows, it resulted in a massive famine that killed a ton of people, like in the Great Leap Forward. And China after a few years realized the mistake, and they imported a fuck ton of birds from Russia to try to fix it.
Yeah, so they course corrected,
and then they changed their campaign policy against the four pests to disclude the sparrows.
Yeah, and that's a pretty fucking huge mistake to make. Like, that killed a lot of people. Mm-hmm. Terrible. But you can't really compare it against Nazi Germany, who did an intentional industrial genocide.
Yeah,
put people into horrible conditions and killed them on purpose, versus a country that accidentally caused a huge famine.
Because you know what you don't see. Sorry,
they're not the same.
Because what you don't see is you don't see Germany later realizing, oh shit, we killed all the Jews. That's a lot of labor power that we missed out on. Quickly, let's import a bunch of Jewish people from all over the world to replace our population. They didn't do that. They knew what they were doing.
But yeah, and then the surveillance thing is obviously just a reference to the control.
Yeah.
Envious of your neighbors does, yeah. But the surveillance, all the cameras there is a reference to how much control the Chinese government and surveillance there is over the people, which I don't like, not a fan of. However, if that kind of stuff makes China totalitarian, Mr. What If Alt-Hist, I'd like to introduce you to an American bill called the Patriot Act, or anything that Edward Snowden revealed, because the U.S. does the exact same thing. And I'm not trying to do this as a whataboutism, but he's saying that America is relatively good and China is bad.
China is literally, he calls them evil.
Yeah, evil.
So it's doing what is displayed on screen, I guess.
Yeah, but the only thing that we're given so far, maybe he'll expand on this point a little bit later. I don't think he does, but maybe. But the only thing we have to go off of that is surveillance, which the U.S. does a ton of. Edward Snowden revealed that fucking Secret Service people were literally listening on individual phone calls. How could you call one relative? Okay.
Yeah, I don't get it either. That's why I was immediately relatively good, and then you're going to compare it to China and Germany. China, which is nowhere near as imperialist in like a surveillance state as the United States is, versus Germany, who was literally inspired to carry out the Holocaust by the United States. And it's I don't understand how you can put the United States then into the relatively good category.
Especially now compared to not compared against China, at least.
No.
If I had to pick between Nazi Germany and the U.S., I'd pick the U.S., but that's mostly because the U.S. is currently in a stage where it already did the genocide that Germany wanted to do. The U.S. already killed all of the people that it was trying to kill, the Native Americans, and put them into their little camps. Reservations, and now we're okay, guys, let's stop being so overtly genocidal and shit.
Time to be covertly genocidal.
Yeah, time to be covertly genocidal. But if I had to pick between Nazi Germany during what it was doing, the only time that it existed, and the United States as it is now, I'm gonna pick the United States. I'd even pick it in the 1940s. I would actually rather be in the U.S. 1940s, because there was more welfare. Racism was a lot higher though. Oof.
Yeah,
But
but
yeah,
you were
it's like,
yeah, but if you were the quote unquote wrong race, you weren't rounded up and put into a literal death camp in the United
yeah.
States, an industrial death camp at least.
At least, thankfully, because I'm white, in 1940s America, I'd be fine in that regard. 1940s Germany,
I think
maybe?
you'd still
I don't
probably
know
be
if I'd,
fine.
I don't know if I'd be considered Aryan by their standards.
Like your hair is
They,
too dark for that.
they do phrenology, yeah.
They do phrenology.
Yeah, they would measure my skull and they'd be like, ah, sorry, man. I know you look really, really white and German, but you're actually like a little bit of a Jew, so out of here.
To the camp.
As far as I'm aware, on my mother's side, I've got some Jew in me. I remember I think it's my mom's mom, like her family is from a part in the Rhineland that was historically populated by Jews. And then my dad would always make the joke that my mom was Jewish. Never confirmed, though. Probably not actually Jewish.
We'll never know.
Under the Nazis, all modern societies that really had a chance of world power were to win, we'd collapse in the shadows of a nightmare that only modern technology could fully realize.
It's funny because I'm like, what do you think like China would do?
They'd conquer the world. They're evil conquerors. They just want to take everything over. That's what China does. That's why they've invaded so many countries like Vietnam.
That was it.
Tibet, maybe? Although Tibet was already owned by the Chinese.
I was going to say, not really Tibet. Tibet's already part of China.
Well, the CCP did invade it. Because they wanted to overthrow it. Because basically when the revolution happened in China, Tibet was a subject of China and like within the Chinese state at that point.
Yeah, but it was like pretty autonomous.
Yeah, it was autonomous, and they had basically a different government there, which resulted when the Chinese won their civil war, they had to go invade Tibet because it was basically its own little region. Mm-hmm. So, like, let's be as generous to him as possible, the anti-Chinese position. And number of countries that China has invaded. Tibet, Vietnam. And I can't think of a single other one. I think that's it. That's two. They're not imperialist. They're honestly just not really like an imperialist country. I mean, the only other one that they have their sight set on is Taiwan, which, considering the history of Taiwan, I would also say that's not really an imperialist measure. They're not just trying to invade Taiwan as like a land grab. They're trying to end the Chinese Civil War, which never actually ended.
Because the Taiwanese government continuing to exist is like a literal threat against Chinese legitimacy in the mainland.
Yeah, but meanwhile, we look at the other side, what he calls a relatively good country like the U.S. or France, even in the modern age, are heavily imperialist. I mean, number of countries that the U.S. has invaded in the time span that Vietnam existed, or that communist China existed. We invaded Iraq, Afghanistan, Vietnam, Korea,
Iraq again.
Iraq again. We invaded Iraq twice. We've supplied weapons to like multiple militant groups throughout the world. We've overthrown multiple nations in order to get leaders who are more friendly to our foreign policy. We funded fascist death squads in places like Central America. Like, come on, man. If anyone wants to conquer the world, it's the United States. The ones who kind of set themselves up as leader of the world after World War II. Not fucking China. The reason China even invaded Vietnam in the first place was because Vietnam invaded a Chinese ally, Cambodia. And I would say, right?
Yeah, even then, because fucking Cambodia was genociding Vietnamese people.
Oh, yeah. No, that's what I was about to say. I think Vietnam was totally right to invade Cambodia. I have no problem with that. But, like, the Chinese didn't, like, do an imperialist war against Vietnam. They didn't invade Vietnam to, like, subjugate it. They invaded Vietnam because Vietnam invaded one of their allies. That's not the same thing as, like, the U.S. invading Iraq because of a spurious connection that the Bushes invented to 9/11. That was completely false, all because they wanted to privatize the Iraqi oil industry again. It's not the same thing. One of them is obviously worse than the other.
Yeah, very plainly so.
Very plainly so. Like, once again, I don't like that the Chinese invaded Vietnam. I don't think that was good. But like the reasons that they had for doing it are obviously less evil than the reasons the U.S. had for invading a country like Iraq, Afghanistan, one of the other ones I said, Vietnam. Vietnam getting invaded by both the U.S. and China. Poor fucking country.
Stuff like China's social credit system, mass surveillance with cameras and technology.
Social credit system is literally just a credit score.
It really is. And it's funny that people try to make the social credit thing sound like a huge issue when it's like
the same thing we have.
It's the same thing that we have, man. We've had it for a much longer time too. It gets your credit score fucks you over. If you have a really shitty credit score, you won't be able to get a loan for anything. You won't be able to like rent anywhere with a low credit score.
Yeah, it fucking ruins you.
Yeah. That shit fucking destroys any chance you have of like living in this debt society that we created. It's really fucked up.
Opens up for oppressive dictators. And then remember, most regimes in history are oppressive, and a significant percentage are now.
All right, pause this. I just want to read this again.
Okay.
Reason for the myth. Already discussed. Abrahamic religions have impregnated the idea into us that progress is inherently a part of reality. Citation needed. Where is that in the Bible? Similarly, life and technology has consistently gotten better long enough in the West that we just assume this is the natural order of things. Similarly, the good guys won over the 20th century, thus not making us realize the evil potential for modernity. Saying that the good guys won in the 20th century, I think, is very wrong. I would prefer that the U.S. not be the global world hegemon, considering the amount of violence and pain that we've caused the rest of the world.
For our own enrichment.
The numerous amounts of coups and invasions that we've supported, the fucking genocides that we've supported in places like Indonesia, Jakarta, putting Pinochet as the leader of Chile.
Yeah, like literally any dictator that we've installed and replaced
like
democratically elected leader with.
The Nicaraguan death squads, the Contras, like all of it. It's just fucking. We've done so much worse than the countries that he thinks are the evil ones, and I'm supposed to believe him when he says that those countries are totally evil and want to conquer the world. Based on the behavior of these countries, the only one I see trying to conquer the world is the U.S.
Mm-hmm. Very actively so. Versus
actively.
China, who's really China's main thing right now is they're just trying to build up their own infrastructure. They're currently building more cities. They're developing their infrastructure even more. And it's like, what's the U.S. doing right now? It's waging imperialist wars across the globe to enrich itself.
Helping fund them. I don't think we're currently...
I'd say currently waging them. But yeah, we're still enriching ourselves off of war.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we love what's happening in Ukraine and Israel right now. The U.S. loves that because there's so much money to be made there.
The U.S. could literally just walk into Israel and end the war today, but they won't.
It kind of seems like they might. Biden keeps talking about how he wants to get directly involved in it. Which, please don't. I mean, we're basically already directly involved, considering that we just sent a big old fucking ship off the coast of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And we're actively giving them money and weapons.
I more mean, like, to end the war by, like, you basically telling Israel to stop by a show of force. We could just do that. But, like, we don't because it's more profitable to, like, sit on it and provide Israel with more shit.
And it's like, what border issues and like political disputes and spats is China currently having? They're having an ongoing issue over the 9-dash line, which isn't really like a militarily escalating conflict whatsoever. It's mostly just people economically bickering and shit and fighting over fishing rights and crap like that. It hasn't gotten violent so far and really doesn't seem like it will. The border dispute that they have ongoing with India, where it is violent, but they've come to a compromise that whenever their soldiers are going to get into a border dispute, they'll throw away their weapons and they just throw fists and use like sticks and shit. Much preferable to a direct war between India and China. I don't like that they fight each other every year, but like, fuck, that's a much better status quo than what could potentially happen from a border dispute like that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, their ongoing dispute that they have with Japan over that island off their coast that isn't even like inhabited as far as I'm aware. Also not even violent or escalating. Meanwhile, the U.S., everything it gets involved with ends in violence and bloodshed, and other nations being subjugated under the U.S. hegemonic power. Like, I hate that idea that we're the good. He only thinks that because he's an American.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of the default that you're taught is we were the good guys. It reminds me of that fucking what is the Ricky Gervais line where he goes, or no, was it Carlin?
Dan Carlin, I think.
Yeah, he goes, oh no, what's his name? It was it's not Dan Carlin. It was the other guy. What's his name? The guy who's on.
I don't know. What's the thing?
Yeah, he just goes. He goes. It's so weird how the good guys won every war.
Oh, Norm Macdonald.
Yeah, Norm Macdonald. Thank you.
He goes, yeah, he has a history book. He goes, well, it says right here in my history book that the good guys won every single conflict in world history. How nice is that?
That's pretty lucky, huh?
Yeah, that's pretty lucky. I love that joke.
It's a pretty good one.
Is going forward that some unscrupulous government doesn't take the possibilities for evil that modern technology has to a horrifying extreme. Number 2, everything is black and white. Who were the good guys in the Boer War? The British invaded
the Africans
countries for the express purpose of taking their diamonds and subjugating them. This was a war that was waged ruthlessly, putting a majority of the entire white population of the Boer republics into concentration camps. The other way to view it is that the British destroyed oppressive apartheid regimes. Boer republics treated the native black populations as practical slaves.
And then immediately replaced it with their own. I mean, I agree in the Boer War, if you look at it as Boers versus British only and, just ignore what the Africans were doing. There is no good guy, right? Obviously, they're both evil. But, in certain conflicts, there is a pretty obvious good guy. And there is a pretty obvious bad guy. I would cite the U.S. versus any of the Indian tribes. Any of them.
Yeah, basically. Any kind of, like, anti-imperialist sort of, like, fight is, it's like one of those clear, like, these guys are the bad guys. The colonizers are definitely the bad guys in this one.
Yeah. Germany versus the Soviet Union. If you don't think there's a clear good guy, bad guy there, I think you're fucking insane. One of I didn't even feel the need to explain it, but like one of them literally invaded the other in order to massacre the entire population and replace it with their own in an aggressive conflict. And then on the other side, they were defending against that. That's like as simple as it fucking gets. Good guy, bad guy.
Mm-hmm. And then if you have to like dance around and say, well, there's not really like a good guy, bad guy in that situation, it's like you are really just running cover for Nazis at that point. You're really just trying to defend the expansion of Lebensraum and say that it was a good thing, or say that it wasn't like necessarily a bad thing. But it's like, no, it necessarily is. If it comes at the expense of killing a native population to replace them with your own, that's bad. That's not good.
Pretty much.
When the Boers later gained power in South Africa, they created a deeply racist, borderline fascist government. I think this is a dumb question. One side being true doesn't make the other side untrue. Everything I said above is accurate, and saying one side did bad stuff isn't letting the other side off the hook. Another question similar to this is nature versus nurture. For centuries, people wondered if our personalities were more dependent upon our genes or our upbringings. What science discovered is that it's really a combination. Genetics affects basically everything in our personalities down to a ridiculous degree, like whether you like jazz or what political party you're most likely to vote for. However, cultural influences are also really important in letting those genes manifest. Even siblings with similar genes have those genes manifest in different directions based on their friend
I'm just waiting for him to get to his point.
Etc. A person whose genes might lead them to vote Republican today might vote for the liberal Whigs in 19th century Britain and enjoy fox hunting.
And I remember asking this before. How do your genes influence your political beliefs that way?
I would say in stuff like
I think he's probably going off of, if you want to pause it, he's probably going off of that kind of old neurological theory of morality where there were like, they did a bunch of studies on the way people see morality and the like trying to find like an inherent undercurrent of the way that people think about morality. And the general conclusion of the study was that there were 5 pillars of morality. And each person had like different levels of severity and how they would react to it. So it was like harm, justice, pain. No, it was harm, justice, purity, authority / respect, and then like one other. But what they found, according to the study, was essentially that there were two broad groups in the population. About half of the population tended to have their dials really set up towards things like justice and harm reduction, whereas other groups tended to have their dials set more towards things like authority and respect. And so the kind of like one of the end conclusions of this study was that like you could figure out why there's a two-party system in America a little bit, because they were, as the guy said, I believe, changees and non-changees, people who wanted change, people who didn't want change. And there's roughly half of the population who leaned one way and half of the other, and these people tended to vote either Republican or Democrat.
Okay.
I would assume that's what he's going off of. That's the only thing I could think of that like would lead him to think that way. But we did a whole thing on that in one of my philosophy classes. And I kind of remember it because I thought it was cool. I don't know if the theories like held up with modern studies, because I think this happened in like the mid 2000s.
Interesting. Because I mean,
but
my immediate thought is like if you have like some kind of genetic condition where you just you lack a conscience, you're just psychopathic. I could see that maybe leading to you voting for things that are like kind of directly opposed to the well-being of other people because you don't really care.
Things that just directly improve your life.
Yeah, you're very like a very selfish individual, and you only want to do things that improve your life. So you'll directly vote for like killing X group to improve Y group's life, and you're part of that Y group.
Oh, sorry. 1 second. Can we? I want to read this section on the right here because he's talking about capitalism versus communism.
Oh, see.
Capitalism versus.
I'll read it.
Capitalism.
Oh, sorry. All right, okay. I'm going to read it. Fuck you. Capitalism versus communism is whether government central planning is more effective than the market. Whether through the Germanys, Koreas, alongside nations that switch from one to the other, whether China, India, Cote d'Ivoire, or Eastern Europe alongside Western nations that have had different levels of growth based on how market-oriented they are, like the UK or Chile, demonstrate this. Capitalism is one.
Oh, he actually cited Chile as like a good example of this working, despite it having like one of the most brutal dictatorships set up by neoliberals. Like neoliberalism started in or was first tested in like Chile.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a nasty citation. But yeah, that's a complete mischaracterization of communism. Like it's fair to say that all the communist countries he cited did engage in central planning, following Lenin's model. And government control, but that's not like the ideal of communism. Communism doesn't look at capitalism and go, actually the state should run the markets. Communism goes, actually the state shouldn't run anything, it shouldn't exist, and there also shouldn't be markets, and everything should be distributed equally. But in order to get to that point, the state will first need to take control of the markets and centrally plan the economy, and then slowly give those things to the people and dissolve itself in the future. That's kind of the idea of specifically Lenin and Marx's original idea. So like this is a mischaracterization. It's not about whether or not government central planning is more effective than the market. It's instead about the distribution equally of all resources. But you have to use the government, you have to use the state specifically in order to get to the idealized world that communism wants.
Mm-hmm. And it's funny because it's like whether government central planning is more effective than the market, where it's like, God, what was I going to say? I'm already forgetting it. Never mind. I'm just like, I find it funny because it's like you said, it's a mischaracterization of like how communism is supposed to work. So it's like you're kind of comparing these like sort of like pseudo-capitalist socialist countries to capitalist countries that kind of like dominated them.
Yeah, that's kind of the other thing is that like well, in some respects when you look at it, a lot of these centrally planned government economies actually were outperforming the US in a lot of metrics.
Yeah.
which is really funny because it contradicts his point there. And then also he goes, well, you could see that the fact that all of these current capitalist countries, their GDP, you know, the capitalist measurement of how good a society is, the line went up. Yeah, so obviously all of these countries are better. Well, let's just completely ignore how the capitalist world versus the communist world is extremely unbalanced. There were far more capitalist countries with far more power and far more control over the global market than there were communist countries. And oftentimes when a communist country would come into power, like the best example ever, Cuba, would just result in that country being blockaded and cut off from the rest of the world. Meanwhile, the rest of the world can trade resources, but fucking Cuba, who doesn't have that much resources on an island, just has to contend with what it has. While every other country gets to do free trade and get resources that they need and shit, Cuba is just cut off from the rest of the world. And then you look that Cuba is not growing the same way that the U.S. is, and you go, well, obviously that's Cuba's fault. Motherfucker, it's the blockade.
Or, I mean, even in the sense that, like, they're going to measure the success of capitalism versus communism by, like, GDP, or based on GDP. just on, like, raw income. It's like, well, look, the United States is making a lot of money, and these communist countries aren't making a lot of money, therefore capitalism gooder. But it
makes more money.
It's like, congratulations, capitalism wins based on a capitalist metric.
But let's look at some other metrics.
If we use the socialist metric, capitalism would fail really hard.
Let's look at something like literacy rates,
home ownership rates,
general education, crime rates, things that like produce the standard of living. You can even look at the fucking, I love the declassified CIA document, where they admit that Soviets were more well-fed than Americans.
Mm-hmm. Although it was based on the nutritional metrics of that time, it was still better for that, for that period, which is really funny.
They were meeting the metric better than the U.S. was.
Which is completely unsurprising that the U.S. can't feed its own people because of how many hungry people there are in this fucking country.
Well, yeah, it's because the system requires poor people, and poor people can't afford food. So they starve. Unlike a system that is designed from the outset to, provide equally from everyone as an intentional thing, would feed its people better.
Just by default.
Yeah. And like I said, look at other metrics. So, like, what country has the most doctors in proportion to its population? It's Cuba. I think Israel actually has the most doctors, but I think in proportion to the population, it's Cuba. Let's see.
Yeah, I have no idea.
I'm looking it up real fast.
I'm going to keep the video going.
Facts support one side way more.
It's Cuba.
Than the other. You still need to keep in mind that making things black and white often does a huge disservice when the world's often very gray. Number 3, logical means correct. I spend a lot of time giving advice to friends. One of the issues I often run into is that they give me arguments that are rationally correct, but if you understand the intangibles involved, they're just really dumb. I'm tired of saying, yes, you could theoretically have a drink or two and then spend the rest of the night studying for the test, since by knowing that friend, 1 or 2 drinks means 6 or 7 and you'll wake up for the test hungover. This is the main issue with ancient Greek philosophy. The ancient Greeks thought abstract thought was superior to experimentation. This held back technology for
the idealists did. Not every ancient Greek did.
And then he says,
there's multiple branches of Greek philosophy, right?
But then he says this mentality held back technology in Greece for 1,000 years.
What?
Yeah, listen to it.
For the test hungover. This is the main issue with ancient Greek philosophy. The ancient Greeks thought abstract thought was superior to experimentation. This held back technology for 1,000 years. If a philosopher can make a rationally coherent argument...
Can we get a citation for that? Hello? Well, what kind of shit is that?
Your citation is going to be a picture of Plato's cave. Deal with it.
I guess so. Like, I wonder how he even, rationalizes that. The fucking the idealist philosophy of Plato... Specifically, I don't know why he says ancient Greek philosophy when it was mostly the idealism comes with Plato. That held back ancient Greek technology. This philosophy that was from Athens held back the entirety of Greek civilization for 1,000 years.
Yeah, because when Plato said his thing, everybody believed it immediately, and they all jumped onto the idealist train.
Yeah, bro, citation fucking needed, please God. Can I get a citation? I know I'm not gonna get a citation, but I really what the hell are you talking about?
I don't even think he knows what he's talking about.
It held back technology for 1,000 years. I'm not even sure how you would begin to measure that. Were there just no technological innovations in Greece for 1,000 years after Plato? Is that what I'm supposed to understand? Because Jesus, I'm pretty sure Jesus was born within 1,000 years of Plato.
He was.
And that's when the Western world got progress, and where Christianity was really popular, Greece. So like,
yeah, it doesn't make any sense, man.
He's just throwing shit out there. I mean, I get that it's supposed to be like hyperbole, but he doesn't ever like expand or explain what he means or cite any like examples or anything to like demonstrate his point. So it just sounds dumb. He just comes off as just fucking like he's just saying shit off the cuff, dude. He's just farting it out.
He really is. Oh man, we should watch his fucking TikToks, or not his YouTube shorts.
His YouTube shorts. Those are mostly just cuts from his videos, though.
Oh, are they? I thought they were like his own like little things.
Oh, well. I didn't think. I mean, yeah, we can check it.
And he had no reason to test it. This really ignores how weak and frail human brains are and how incapable we are of understanding the world's complexity.
Pause this. Oh, God. All right, can you turn off the subtitles?
Yeah.
I love this. These were the guys who invented the steam engine, computer, fire-starting magnifying glasses. It did nothing with them. You are talking out of your ass, my guy. The steam engine was like the Greeks had a thing where you could like boil water and like the force of steam would make like statues move. And you could like rotate things with it. But like the reason the steam engine works in the 1800s isn't because the mechanism, it's because we found out you could burn coal and use it in a steam engine because that made the steam come out much faster and made it able to generate electricity and move shit. They did not invent the steam engine as we currently know it. They had no coal. They didn't have coal to make it like steam useful. It was just a fucking little gadget that they invented and wasn't really useful because they had no massive fuel. You can't just like, it's not like they invented a fucking locomotive engine and we're just like, fuck, what could we do with this? No, it was like a little gyroscope that would spin with water boiling. That's not the same thing as a cold-fueled steam engine.
And another funny thing I like about that, too, is it's like, these are the guys who invented XYZ thing. Also, these are all supposed to be the guys who didn't know anything about progress either. Yet, they were the ones who invented the steam engine and the computer.
They also did not invent the computer.
Not progress.
At least not the computer as we know it. I'm pretty sure what he's referring to is the fucking...
the little, like, astronomical thing they found underwater?
Yeah. The gadget that we found underwater that we concluded was basically a star tracking device and allowed them to predict like eclipses in the future, which most ancient civilizations could do, by the way.
Yeah, but I think the thing
ancient people.
Sorry.
Ancient people were really good at studying the stars. But yeah, the thing with this is that it was like automated.
Yeah, so I mean, I would say that is a computer because you could give it inputs and it would give you outputs.
Just well, sure. Like by the most basic definition of what a computer is, that's like a computer. But they didn't invent the fucking like computer as we know it. They didn't invent the digital like super math machine that can like do all kinds of. It's just a complete mischaracterization to make them seem dumb. Be like, well, it kind of gives off the impression that they invented like a fucking MacBook, or like the 1950s big computer, and then just were like, the fuck can I do with this?
Just gonna let it rot.
No, not at all, dude. What they invented was essentially like a really complicated watch. That could take inputs, but it's not like what you think of when you think of a computer. It's not the same thing. But he just like by using such simple terms, he's equivocating the two things and making the Greeks seem stupid, so that he can better serve his point that they were stupid. Which,
oh man,
some respects they were, but not the ones he's talking about. Aristotle hated Sparta because women had power. That's stupid. He should hate Sparta because they were a gross military power that conquered other people.
This guy's so fucking dumb, man. I hate how he just contradicts himself all the time.
It's really funny.
It's so frustrating because then he's just like, I'm super smart, guys. I know lots of things. I'm super smart. I'm also going to say that only Christianity allowed for progress, but here are the ancient Greeks who invented the steam engine and computer. They did. That's not progress, though.
They didn't do anything with them, so
that doesn't count.
variables we don't know about, and we often don't value the importance of variables correctly. If you give me a logically coherent argument for a game plan, I'll tell you, why don't you do it, or find an example of someone else doing it before I tell you it's a good idea. I was once talking to a friend who asked me if my predictions ever worried me since my line of thought was perfectly logical. I told him...
Perfectly logically! His line of thought went perfectly... His all history videos, he's basically Nostradamus for history.
Can we look at this, by the way? This is the world in 2100.
So the USA has conquered Canada, and Greenland for some reason.
Yeah, why?
Also, it seems like we also own Argentina.
We lost California.
Oh yeah, California is independent for some reason. So is Ontario and Quebec.
And British Columbia. Cuba is now an American ally. That's interesting.
Oh, okay. That's an American allies. Oh god, I thought that was actually the U.S. Whew. They didn't use it for stock trading, so it basically doesn't count. That's honestly his logic.
Really is. It didn't increase GDP, so it's not progress.
Yeah, they couldn't like figure out what 1 million plus 1,556,25 was on a computer, so it didn't count.
Dog, look at the Middle East.
The Middle East is just
the Turkish Empire.
The Turkish Empire.
The Turkish Empire.
Yeah, this is one of his all history maps, but he's citing this as he's like, I'm so good at
This is proof of how logical I am.
Yeah, all of my predictions for the future, he said, were perfectly logical. Perfectly logical. What happened to Russia?
Why is China imperialist again?
Impartial, or was that say Imperial China? The qualities.
Imperial China. Yeah.
Imperial China.
Korea is unified. Japan's still the same. Oh man.
Also, what the fuck is Brazil doing?
That's not doing anything. It's just chilling. I don't know why. He doesn't care about Brazil, Peru, Bolivia. None of that. None of that's important. He doesn't care about any of Central Africa or South Africa. None of that's important either.
No predictions there.
No predictions there. French Africa is apparently now a thing.
I think that means that he's referring to the French-speaking parts of Africa becoming a greater alliance.
Well, yeah, but that's interesting. I like how Imperial China has conquered half of Russia. The Kazakhs are now independent and have liberated part of Siberia. The Kazans are independent, and then Russia's just a tiny little state now.
It's Muscovy.
Yeah, Russia basically, it just lost all of Siberia and just resorted I forget the word.
I want to know how the
borders.
I want to know how the Ottoman Empire came back. Oh, I'm sorry, the Turkish Empire.
Yeah, I don't know what's up with that. How is Turkey?
What the fuck is with that?
How did Turkey conquer Saudi Arabia, fucking Egypt, Libya, all the Sudans? Jesus, what the hell, man? All of them.
Also, does that say the East African Federation?
Yes,
I don't know. East Africa is going to federate. That's interesting.
India. There's an Indian Federation too.
Weird. Yeah, maybe we got to watch this one too, because remember this. All of this, according to him, is perfectly logical. Take it back so we can hear that again. I want to hear him say that all of his predictions for the future are perfectly logical. My thinking is not perfectly or even close to rational. I want to hear it again.
I was once talking to a friend who asked me if my predictions ever worried me since my line of thought was perfectly logical.
Perfectly logical!
Well, that's what he's saying.
No, okay, that's his friend saying. Okay.
Yeah, and then he's saying, my thinking is not perfectly or even close to rational. What? My thinking is not perfectly or even close to rational.
I was worried there that he was fucking trying to say that this was a perfectly logical outcome for the future. Oh, whew.
Wait, so he is admitting that this is a completely irrational conclusion he came to?
Not completely. You just said it's not even close to rational.
All right, fair enough. So it's not even close to being a rational look at the world in and I would agree. This is not a rational way to look at 2020 or 2100. It's
very strange.
Yeah, this is somebody with a fill tool on fucking paint had a bunch of fun.
I love that the borders in half the world just don't shift. I'm also gonna take a piss real fast.
Yeah, he just fills in the lines, man. It looks like a bunch of the African countries have fallen apart, which is interesting. Brazil is still just hanging out being Brazil. Oh, all right. I guess we're gonna wait a little bit for him to go to the bathroom.
All right, I'm back. Oh, what are you doing? Making food? You're muted.
I'm making a sandwich. Zero.
What kind of meat do we have?
Quick little break for some food.
He's having a snack break. Are you doing grilled cheeses? Ah. Oh. What else do we have here? So there's the Indian Federation. I'm gonna try to discern what this is through the quality. So Kazakhstan, for some reason, conquered. I love how Russia got split into three. Like it's like a nice Neapolitan ice cream, just three stripes of countries. What is that in the Caucasus? Is that Chechnya? Is Chechnya owned like, or is that Chechnya and Armenia?
It looks like Chechnya and Azerbaijan.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't know.
The territory's looking a little fucking different than it normally does.
Mm-hmm. Now, if Russia was to fall apart like this, I could totally see Chechnya kind of becoming its own region, its own state. That would be.
I don't think it'd be that big though.
No, probably not. But you know, he's not close to rational. So his words, not mine.
I told him no, and that my job is basically betting against God, and so my chances of actually being correct are very low. The corollary to this fallacy is that our minds
at least he'll admit that.
Mm-hmm.
The truth is that our minds are inherently self-serving and irrational. We ignore information we don't like. Much of modern liberalism holds that if we educate people properly, they'll behave well since they'll be more rational. This ignores that Nazi Germany was one of the most educated nations on Earth at the time, and the Puritans who did the Salem witch trials were some of the best educated people in their hemisphere. Under certain circumstances, irrationality is good.
The incest
a brother
argument.
and sister committing incest alone with perfect contraception, and the argument behind
Okay, hold up. So he's saying, okay, let it play, and then we'll take back and read this, because I think he was about to say that you can make the same argument to allow incest that you can for Nazism.
Yeah, what's up with that? Why am I on the wrong? Sorry.
Nazi, some of the best educated people in their hemisphere.
Yeah, actually, hold up. Take it back. I didn't even notice that. That raises up a good point. Take it back further.
Let's see. Oh, further?
We need to go back to the alt history. Yeah.
Okay. What
happened to Ukraine?
Should take this big of an L, but not at Ukraine's expense.
Yeah, Russia took all of Ukraine.
Yeah, what's up with that? How did it do that?
So, Russia fully collapses, loses all of its empire, but it gets Finland and Ukraine. How did that happen? Oh wait, no, that's
no,
not
it already
Finland.
has that. It already has that.
Yeah. Sorry. That's weird. Why the fuck? But not Crimea. Crimea is for some reason owned by the Turkish Ottoman Empire again.
Yeah, that's fucking weird.
Man, maybe we gotta watch that video. That's
and then
fucking...
look, fucking Turkey conquered Greece. It conquered It looks like it conquered Albania.
Yeah, dude, I'm pretty sure he just found a map of the Ottoman Empire and colored it green and then called it the Turkish Empire.
And then he was like, "That's gonna." Let me look up the Ottoman Empire real quick.
You'll have to find a couple of different.
Oh my god, hold on.
Examples, because territory depends on.
Let's see if we can find the exact one he's using.
Bro, it's that one. It's got. Oh
close.
My god. It's really just like He's trying to do the Ottoman Empire again.
Hey, look, it's like almost exactly the map that he put up here. The Turkish Empire, good old Turkish Empire, you know.
Although that one they own Serbia and the rest of North Africa. It looks like his map cuts off at Libya.
It does, because those are where the French Africans are, you know.
Yeah.
What a weird dude.
Yeah, I don't really get how this works. I don't really see how like there's a I'm assuming the Turkish Empire in his mind is also like an Islamic state. So I don't really understand how there's like a neo-Islamic empire, but they don't take the rest of North Africa, despite that also being like historically a part of the Islamic like sphere. You know, most of the Islamic empires throughout history have owned all of North Africa, from Saudi Arabia all the way over to Morocco. Usually ending at like the Gibraltar state.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting that he doesn't like give the Turkish Empire the rest of that. I wonder why.
I really want to know how America and Canada got into a war that resulted in Ontario, Quebec, and British Columbia becoming independent states, but still American allies.
That's assuming it's a war.
That's true. They could have just joined the Federation.
Yeah, they could have just federated, except for those territories.
Well, how did California? Then I have to ask, how did California leave the Federation?
I have no idea. I mean, once again, this video just might be worth watching.
Do you want to switch to that? That sounds like fun.
We should do that one, or the what if Japan invaded the Soviet Union during World War II. But let's do this one, because this one's really weird.
This one, okay. I can't type. Oh, I think this is it. Oh,
there's the map.
This is a different one. Let's see.
That's 2120.
This was a year ago. This was how long ago? 2 years ago? So it has to be older than 2 years.
Oops.
Situations were different and thus demanded different. I released a form.
Why didn't it go back to my search? What if altist criticism, debate, response, reaction, communism, Vosh.
Vosh.
21. Crisis of the 21st century. My 12 best maps.
His 12 best maps? That's kind of interesting.
Oh man, these all look really dumb.
My heresy continues. America's 21st century, the future of Europe. 8 taboo questions about history and society. Whoa.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with this, man.
What if World War I never happened? Wars of the... Oh, there we go. Wars of the 2020s and the 2030s.
Where's that at?
That seemed kind of interesting. Or we can continue the video that we were watching.
I don't even know if you're on my... Where are you looking at?
What?
Where were you looking?
It was on the... I mean, you've scrolled so much, I don't know where it was, but it was on the list.
Oh, are you watching the stream?
Well, I can't read it from Discord because the quality's so low.
I see, okay. So this is Wars of the 2020s and 30s. Let's see.
The past 80 years have been called the long...
This is from 2020. September 2020. So this is like right during like the height of COVID, I would say. Not even the height. I think December was the height of COVID in the United States. But this is like right before that.
Peace.
I don't understand how well this is aged.
There's been no major wars between important industrialized countries. This is not the norm. The
important industrialized countries.
Yeah, fuck the third world.
Nearly all the countries in history have been in a permanent state of waging war or preparing for the next war.
That's not true at all.
Peace, whether the Pax Romana or the long peace of the 19th century, have been precious respites, normally caused...
The Pax Romana was not actual peace. Well, once again, like I said earlier, there was a ton of shit happening in all of that. Constant border conflicts. But, you know, if you're in the Imperial Corps, it was pretty cool, I guess.
That's basically
Same thing.
That's basically how people view peace. Is it peace for the world hegemon? Is the world hegemon in control and it's not like in the middle of being actively dismantled? Oh, that's peace.
Oh, hold up.
Are people killing each other all around the world? That's not peace. I mean, that's still peace.
Look at the time span he has for the second one, the Pax Britannicana. I can't even fucking say that word. 1815 to 1914. When did Napoleon take power?
Like, what was that? 1815? I don't know.
Oh, hold on. 1803 to 1815. Okay. Whew. So he has it after. So from the end of the Napoleonic Wars to 1914 is the Pax Britannicana. I don't know. I feel like I gotta look up things because the Civil War happens in the middle of that time frame.
The Franco-Prussian War happens during that.
The Franco-Prussian War. Yeah, the Franco-Prussian War happens.
France has like 3 revolutions.
Isn't this also in the time frame that the Taipei Rebellion would happen?
Mm-hmm. And the Boxer Rebellion. No, that's just the same one.
The period of relative peace between the great powers. So, like, we're not counting the Civil War. We're not counting any of the things that happened in China. We're not counting the Franco-Prussian War. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, no, those are the unimportant, unindustrialized countries. Remember, he said it's only peace for the industrialized, important countries. So, Western European ones.
Yeah. Pain.
By one military power being so preeminent as to making war idiotic for anyone else. For
no!
Which I mentioned in a previous video.
There is so much war!
Immense tension. The possibility for any
Why is the world crazy now?
Out in the near future is going up.
Chinese allies.
Wars of the 2020s, my humble prediction. Apparently India and America are going to get into an alliance. I don't see that happening. Weak Chinese allies.
And he thinks that this is going to lead into World War III?
I guess so.
This is a video to talk about the possible flashpoints for a conflict in the next 15 to 20 years. I'm not expecting all of these wars to break out, and some won't happen in the 2020s or 30s, with this video awkwardly stretching in parts to mid-century, but it's the best we can do when predicting the future. This expects to make a general overview of the highest possibilities for conflicts. A lot of the specifics at how these wars would be fought and who would win I'll cover in a future video about World War III. So with that done, let's start.
Epic intro.
I know.
An ego trip, which I vomit reading his books.
The world today is an absolutely
because citing your sources is an ego trip.
It's really hard to keep track of all the various currents taking place because everything is moving so fast. Should we be focusing on China, the Middle East, the US election, or Africa? Well, Magellan TV is a great start.
Oh, what? What a terrible segue.
6 war zones to investigate what.
Wait, this is still the ad. Water Wars.
This is the one that worries me the most. As global population, and especially
I've heard a lot about the idea of water wars because they think that drinking water is going to get ever more scarce in the future.
Is basically inevitable. This is compounded by global warming, which in gross simplification makes the Arctic wetter while the tropics drier, resulting in more water scarcity in some very populated regions. Of all the topics involved here, water wars tend to be the most intractable and the most likely, since, in general, for the countries involved, the water is an existential issue they're willing to die over. As upriver nations dam up the rivers, under most circumstances, a war
that's happening with
likely
Ethiopia and
unless there's
Sudan.
some variable I can't see.
Or no, I think it was Ethiopia and Egypt actually. Maybe it was Sudan and Egypt. Fucking one of the countries bordering Egypt tried to build a dam across the Nile, because the start of the Nile was in their territory. I think it was Ethiopia, and Egypt got really mad about it. I honestly don't know what happened after that though.
I haven't heard anything.
No war
about that.
happened, obviously. What?
I haven't heard anything about that.
Yeah, no war happened, because I think we would have heard about that. But I just remember that was an issue a while ago. Was someone trying to dam up the Nile because it was in their territory instead of Egypt's?
Mm-hmm. That's kind of funny. Oh no!
The last 80 years have been called the long. For simplification, for the countries involved, the water is an existential issue they're willing to die over. As upriver nations dam up the rivers, under most circumstances, a war is very likely unless there's some variable I can't see. This amounts to an issue of survival for many of the downriver nations, which will do anything and everything to keep what often amounts to their only water supply. If a downriver nation loses their water supply, they effectively lose their independence at best, and at worst are simply erased from existence.
Dependence on irrigation?
The first example of a war like this is the Ethiopia-Egypt water dispute.
Oh, hey!
Ethiopia is building the Renaissance Dam.
What did I just talk about?
I know.
Blocking Egypt's water supply. Just for some statistics, Egypt is 95% dependent on the Nile for its water supply, and so the 10% decline in the Nile's river water that's projected could see Egyptian farmland outside the delta decline by 30%.
And how bad is that a stream delay?
Hydropower losses could be up to 30%. Some
I just saw that comment pop up.
Yeah, I did too.
Agricultural land is a relatively plausible option. Remember, this is a country where a significant percentage of the population are subsistence farmers. Ethiopia's incentive here is that this dam would provide enough cheap...
Has this been resolved yet?
...to power the entire nation.
Because, I mean, you know, like I said, no war has happened. No war has happened between Egypt and Ethiopia, because we would have heard about that. But like, I wonder if any conclusion was come to.
Let's see. This is from September. Second round of negotiations on Ethiopia's mega dam wrap up. Failed to bring an agreement between Ethiopian downstream neighbors. Let's see. Yeah, so I guess it's just a big nothing burger. I wonder if they're still going through.
Send me the article. I just want to look through it.
There you go.
Everyone got distracted by Ukraine and Israel.
Yeah, I guess so. But this was only in September. September 25th. It was a month ago.
Ethiopia reiterates its commitment to continue negotiating. Yeah,
they're still working on it.
They're just working on it. It doesn't really seem like there's anything too hostile, although I guess the latest rounds weren't productive.
Mm-hmm. You know, maybe we should have a Nile Federation so they can all share the water. That's going to be in my 2100 alt history map. The Nile Federation.
The Federation of the Nile?
Yeah, man. Because apparently everything just federates, you know?
Oh.
In fact, bribing Sudan with electricity, the next nation downriver by the Nile, is what resulted in Sudan siding with Ethiopia in this issue against Egypt. Similarly, Sudan is much less dependent on the Nile due to a combination of natural higher rainfalls and aquifers. There is an element of a proxy war here, with Iran and Turkey supporting Ethiopia, while Israel, the Gulf Arab states, and Saudi Arabia are Egyptian allies. In a direct war, none of these nations would likely get directly involved. At the end of August, Egypt and Ethiopia failed to reach an agreement, which means Ethiopia will press ahead without compromise from Egypt. This has resulted in the US pulling aid out of Ethiopia, which was more of a Chinese ally anyway. Neither of these countries are world powers, and thus are under the
Because as you know, countries can only have one ally.
Ethiopia will probably stop building the dam if China...
I love how China's just become the new Soviet Union in terms of, like, American fear.
Yeah, you know, we gotta warmonger against them constantly. Enter a second Cold War. He's not saying anything crazy yet.
with the rebellion of the Tigray tribal group, which would delay this issue for a good while.
I don't know.
Egypt, with its historically
I don't think a war will happen here, but I also I'm not very informed on the situation, so I can't really comment on it. I just know that it was an issue, but I mean, he's apparently thinking a war's going to happen.
A mountainous country with a reputation.
From what I'm seeing, I mean, apparently it's like still going on, so we shall see.
If the Nile is dammed up, it would be
go back to the other video. I was hoping for his I wanted to get the context behind that super dramatic map he showed off in it. No, the other one.
Video explaining situations were different.
Yeah.
Let's see, logical means correct.
No, we were where we are.
Were we? No, because we were here, and that's why we hopped off.
Okay.
Yeah, we haven't gotten a relative morality yet.
Why was the timer so far in there? Why was the scroll bar so far in the video when you came back to it?
The URL.
The corollary to this fallacy is that our minds are inherently rational. The truth is that our minds are inherently self-serving and irrational. We ignore information we don't like. Much of modern liberalism holds that if we educate people properly, they'll behave well since they'll be more rational. This ignores that Nazi Germany was one of the most educated nations on Earth at the time, and the Puritans who did the Salem witch trials were some of the best.
And that ignores the what he's talking about right now. Like, just educating people doesn't really mean anything, because you can educate people on things that are wrong. Like you could be really, really, really involved and really, really smart about something that's just wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the usual idea with increasing education leads to more rational people means to teach them
that are correct.
Yeah, teaching them things that are correct. That's kind of simple. I mean, teach them rationality instead of just assuming that, women have hysteria and are witches. He brought up the fucking Salem witch trials.
Mm-hmm.
Or, teach them actual biological facts, things that we can verify rather than conspiracy theories about the Jews like Nazi Germany did. It's not, I don't know, that equivocation there. Not equivocation, but oh man, I'm losing it. I'm losing my train of thought. Oh yeah. Just the idea that all education, just educating a populace, and then just going, well, this populace is really educated, doesn't really mean anything if you don't consider what the population was educated in.
Yeah, it really doesn't. If all of the population is educated in Nazi ideology, obviously they're not going to be a better society for that.
Yeah.
So let's see. The incest argument. Most people often say that incest is morally wrong since it can result in bad genetic effects for the children. Yet if contraceptives are used well, then there is no argument against incest. Similar arguments can be made for stuff like burning a picture of a loved one in private, laughing at racist jokes online in private, etc. This is if you base a moral system around only real-world logical effects.
And then the Nazi argument.
There's so evidence. I'm assuming that's supposed to say no.
There's no evidence for the soul or the value of human life. Where do the Nazis think that?
Darwinism is the only provable system. A provable value system. Starting from there, the main thing that matters is the survival of your genes and people with genes like yours. With no abstract morality, there is no incentive to not be a free rider or to follow moral codes. It makes sense to kill people with different genes in order to increase the chances of your own gene surviving. For the people
that kind of ignores. Oh, go ahead.
I was just finishing. For the people who will take this out of context, I do not support Nazism. I'm using Nazism as a waypoint for something obviously evil in order to demonstrate morality. It is not purely rational.
Yeah, fair enough. But he's not even he's not characterizing Nazism correctly.
No, not at all.
It wasn't about the spreading of genes from a Darwinist perspective. The Nazis definitely did believe in Darwinist, social Darwinism and shit. But their goal wasn't German genes need to spread and we need to out Darwin all of the other races. The Nazis believed that there was a global Jewish conspiracy against them, allied with the communist factions in order to suppress the German people, and that the German people, in order to excel as a nation, needed fucking Lebensraum, which they would steal from the communists in the East. There's a lot of racial ideology in there, but to just boil it down to just well, the Nazis wanted to be more good at evolution than everyone else, is heavily simplifying it and ignoring the conspiratorial nature of the Nazi ideology.
Which was a huge fucking part of it.
It was a huge part of it.
It's a huge part, man.
They were conspiracy theorists. They had fucking whack conspiracies about Jews.
It's like kind of ignoring. It's like kind of ignoring manifest destiny in American history. Because if you ignore that, you kind of ignore the entire like reason they expanded eastward or westward anyway.
Yeah, or at least part of it.
Circumstances, irrationality is good. A brother and sister committing incest alone with perfect contraception and the argument behind Nazism and social Darwinism both logically make perfect sense, but we all know that those
they don't.
Wrong. Similarly, a person dying.
That's not the argument for Nazism.
No, it's not. It's
they do not make perfect logical sense. And the fact that you think they do is kind of concerning.
But he put a disclaimer. He's not a Nazi.
Well, yeah, but like apparently, according to him, the argument for Nazism, as he just laid out there, makes perfect logical sense. Which it's not even the right argument. Nor does it really make sense. Apparently
it does. Apparently it does. But remember, he's not entirely rational.
People like to say that morality
his predictions
is relative,
are.
Since if two people disagree on something, there can be no perfect agreement. However, under the circumstances of the real world, this collapses. Let me run a test. In large parts of northeastern Africa, they cut off a woman's clitoris, labia majora, and often so much the vagina that the woman can't enjoy sex at all, masturbate, and urination is painful and only a tiny hole is left. In some parts of Somalia, the vagina is cut up so badly that a woman can't have sex at all, and then another surgery takes place before marriage. Similarly, take foot binding, where in China from 1300 to 1900, women had their feet broken so they couldn't walk, wearing these horrifying tiny shoes, all for fashion. I think every person, no matter if you believe morality is relative or not, shuddered there, and that's the point. Evil
I mean, the people who were doing those things didn't.
Suddenly...
Obviously, they didn't shudder at it. That was natural and normal to them. Not saying they're good, but like, to just go, every person who heard that just shuddered at the idea, then how the fuck did it become a thing in the first place?
I mean, it was, in all fairness to like something like foot binding, that was enforced, and that was done to you as a child. You kind of didn't have a choice in that.
Well, no, I understand that, like, you didn't have a choice in that, but I mean, the people...
Yeah, but it was
perpetuating the cultural...
They weren't shuddering at it, yeah.
Yeah, they were shuddering at it. They thought it was a good, they're like, oh, you want your feet to look pretty. Like, that wasn't like something that they were horrified by, obviously, considering that they kept doing it as a cultural practice for, fucking 300 years or whatever, 600 years. Same thing with female genital mutilation. I think it's a horrible thing, but to just go like every person on Earth should just like shudder and just be like, oh, obviously not, considering it's still widely practiced. I believe if you take it back, I think he's trying to make the argument. He's using this as evidence for like an objective morality. Which once again, really? If it's because if if there is objective morality and this is his evidence, then he's not evidencing it very well. He's not supporting it because people disagree.
Yeah,
like people do not shudder at those ideas. So your evidence here doesn't work.
All right, let's see it.
Surgery takes place before marriage. Similarly, take foot binding. Where
you got to take it back further.
Oh, really?
Humans disagree on something, there can be no...
Take it back
all the way.
Similarly, a person trying to protect their parents Darwinially makes no sense, but we'd all see the honor in it. Number 4, morality is relative. Lots of cool people.
Fourth lie about reality. Morality is relative.
If two people disagree on something, there can be no perfect agreement. However, under the circumstances of the real world...
That's not the reason people think that.
Let me run a test. In large parts of northeastern Africa, they cut off a woman's clitoris, labia majora...
So, I'm assuming you can still hear me.
The woman can't enjoy sex.
Yeah, so he goes that we have to run a... He's like, let's run a test to prove that morality is objective. And then he names 2 things, and he's like, everyone in the world should have shuddered at this. But if you really think about it, obviously that's not the case, because these things were practiced for hundreds of years. Like, people did not always shudder at these. Some people thought this is a good thing. Some people think that about castration, even though that's, in my opinion, obviously bad.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just like he characterized it earlier. 2 people have a disagreement, therefore, no perfect agreement can be reached. Therefore, morality is relative. It's his evidence here for morality not being relative is this fucking litmus test that he's doing, where he talks about 2 horrible things and tries to get you to be morally outraged about it. But it's just like, if you consider it from the perspective of the people who grew up in those societies and believed in those things, they're not going to shudder at it. They don't. It's not this. It's not evidence for objective morality.
if anything, it's evidence for objective moral relativism because like, and I mean moral relativism in the sense that like morality changes over time because people have changing perspectives on things. The fact that the Chinese were pretty okay with foot binding for 600 years, and then after the empire fell, they stopped being okay with it and they ended the practice.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, no, I think they ended it before the empire fell. I wonder. I'll have to look that up later. But yeah, no, it's like obviously people change their minds. Like even like outright chattel slavery in the United States wasn't always agreed upon by everybody in the country. There were huge debates about it. So like, and there are people who didn't have any moral qualms about it at all. They thought it was just part of like natural life. These people are just inherently inferior to us.
And that's not like to say that it's like for sure that morality is relative. It's just that these are direct counter examples to what he just said. His idea that like everyone should shudder at this does not work.
No,
because not all people do.
Which is funny, but oh boy, good old what if all hissed.
Fashion. I think every person, no matter if you believe morality is relative or not, shuddered there, and that's the point. Evil doesn't exist if you've lived a comfortable life. Evil suddenly starts existing when the Tatars are about to burn your village, kill your parents, and enslave your siblings. Something a lot of people don't realize is that when you throw away standards, you automatically get the worst product. Imagine bringing your car to a mechanic, and then imagine the quality of work you'd get out of a society that didn't care about finished product's quality. We've been doing this in the arts for a century. You can.
Oh my god.
We've been doing this in the arts for a century. I love that.
It's so funny.
Just got to rag against modern art there, just for the hell of it.
Oh, so silly.
Or to not believe in evil if it's not affecting you. The gulags, Auschwitz, and the slave ships prove evil. And if evil exists, so must good.
Not
the
equatable.
Truth is, I don't know what the right morality is. It's too complicated for me to figure out right now. However, I do know.
Well, for the time being, ignore that the American prison system is far worse than the gulags ever were.
Not trying it. Number 5, science and other false gods. As you figured out, my views are sort of weird, but I still consider myself a Christian. I have total respect.
You just seem like a right winger.
There's no way we can prove God, and so I totally understand if you don't believe in him. What annoys me, however, is that atheists often construct belief structures just as irrational as God and then tout them as scientific. Take the statement, I believe in science, for example, or science should dictate society. This really means nothing. Science is a method, one of the most successful of all time and one that's helped our lives enormously, but...
Well, I mean, I would say in that situation they're probably referring to science as the collection of knowledge that humans have gathered through the scientific method, not the method itself.
Yeah, I will agree that the statement by itself, I believe in science or science should rule society, is kind of just fucking like, it's kind of like a dumb thing to say.
Yeah.
But I do think, I agree. I think he's misunderstanding what people mean when they say that. Because usually when they say that, they mean in opposition to like, you know, they see church leaders and people with religious beliefs using their religious beliefs to influence reality. And they go, I don't think you should do that. You should do it based on science. But instead of articulating it like that, they just go, science should rule the government. Science should dictate society.
Well, I don't believe in God. I believe in science.
Yeah, you know, it's like, it's kind of like a dumb thing to say, but I think if you like think about what they actually mean when they say it, it makes it a little bit more sense.
Yeah. That's why I'm like, he's just kind of like not really thinking about what they mean, but he's just really like going what they literally said and then just going, well, that's wrong because XYZ.
Mm-hmm.
Good job, man.
Not a value structure. Science doesn't tell me how to live a fulfilling life or what I should eat for lunch. The real teller here is that literally every part of the political compass has at one point claimed their value system is scientific. I find communism the perfect example of this. Communists consider their ideology to be scientific, but that's based on a dialectic of history that has no experimental validity and has been continually proven wrong over the last 200 years. I find it amusing that when I argue with Marxists,
If communism was in any way scientific, they would have given up by now, considering how many times they failed. That's how experiments in a scientific method work. Yeah, you know, normally if you try something numerous times and it never works, you would. But the reason that communists continue to fight the struggle is that there are external factors as to why these communist states fail, namely constant pressure from outside forces trying to constantly dismantle what they're doing and, you know, unending aggression. You know, immediately after the Soviet Union was formed, it was invaded by 11 different countries. And, you know, most of the world is extremely antagonistic towards these countries.
Let's also
pretty much since the get-go.
Let's also ignore the fact that a lot of these countries that became communist were pre-industrial societies that had to
Yeah.
quickly industrialize to catch up with the rest of the world who had already industrialized like 100 years ago. So all these other Western countries had time to sort of develop industrialization and benefit from their fucking massive empires all the way across the world that they were siphoning resources away from to pump the imperial core full of money. While these communist countries were, especially in China's case, one of those colonized countries.
Yeah,
and it's like
we're extremely poor.
So they're already on that sort of economic like starting ground, you know, and they had to work their way up through the battle against the largest empires on Earth.
Yeah, and I go, also just kind of like to mention this to him, I go, what about Cuba and Vietnam, who have largely maintained their ability to like stay ideologically consistent, and they've given concessions, especially Vietnam, with the reintroduction of markets. China did the exact same thing, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
But like Vietnam and Cuba have largely stuck to it. They haven't failed. They're not failures. What's up with that?
Yeah, I really don't know. It's really weird.
Wait, what does he say that? I'm probably missing some.
I'm probably missing some things here. There are loads of tiny communist movements I can't keep track of. Inform me in the comments.
Oh yeah, there's lots of them, especially in the Philippines.
Weird that it doesn't have the Philippines lighted up. It's kind of funny. All right.
Well, the communists don't rule it.
I know, but no, he says he has some that have communist leaning, like the brown ones.
Oh. How is Poland communist leaning?
What
the fuck?
Poland was communist by conquest.
Oh, okay. Which ones are communist leaning?
The brown ones.
India? Madagascar? Those are all communist leaning, huh?
Yeah, I guess so.
Some of those I can see, actually. Syria, yeah.
I fucking hit the
Libya for sure.
Situations were different.
I'm so mad. Here we go.
It's been continually proven wrong over the last 200 years. I find it amusing.
What do you mean by proven wrong?
And I have to throw in the obligatory like communism was never tried thing, where like if you have an experiment and then you don't actually get to do the experiment properly, you didn't really do the experiment, did you?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's the old classic line, but yeah, that is also a fair idea. The idealized communist society that, you know, or the at least structure of a communist society that they ultimately try to achieve, they never were able to achieve. But you know, I mean, if every socialist transitionary state fails, then I think you could probably, and not saying I agree with this, but you know, if every single socialist transitionary state fails, you could probably discount what Lenin said about the transition between capitalist and communist societies.
Sure. I mean, and I would say that would be the case maybe like in a vacuum if you could try these things out in a sort of like isolated situation where there's no external forces being applied to these countries to kind of force them to neoliberalize.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is just like while I agree with his sentiment that once the experiment fails enough times, you can abandon it, but I can't really say that this experiment has been failed because it hasn't been tested in proper or it hasn't been tested in proper conditions, because every time one starts, it's immediately cut off, isolated from the rest of the world, and faced with a ton of military aggression unless it gives concessions.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard to say that the experiment failed, in my opinion.
No, I agree.
Especially with also things like Cuba.
Yeah, there are nominally communist nations that are actually like doing pretty well. Well, for their like situations at least. Cuba would probably
definitely not failed
without that embargo.
Yeah, you definitely couldn't call them failed.
No, not at all. Because is it gonna like? There we go.
They quote Marx at me and assume that must mean what they're saying is true. I don't give a damn what Marx said. I care what actually happened in the real world. However, believing Marx saying something makes it true is just religious thinking masking itself as scientific. Basically every ideology...
I didn't even see what any of that said.
It was just some fucking cringy thing for Bertrand
Marxism
Russell.
enters the same brain space as a religion, and so Marx becomes an effective, infallible prophet. No, he doesn't. Dude, this is how you know he never interacts with like any communist spaces, because like people criticize Marx all the time.
They do. There's a lot of criticism of Marx, and like Marx isn't the only communist thinker that people like look to. And there's lots of disagreements about the role of the state in the socialist. You know, the thing that he would say was the failures is what Marx and Lenin would have advocated for, which is the socialist transitionary state. And there's a lot of disagreement among Marxists about that. It's like one of the most hotly debated things. What the fuck? Is how should the socialist transitionary state work? Should it even like be a thing if you're an anarchist? And how, you know, how should you go about the use of force if force is necessary? All kinds of shit like that. Like it's not as unified as you would like to make it out to be.
And it's funny that they have Marx as the Messiah on here. And God is dialectical materialism.
So hilarious. Because like if anyone's the prophet or the Messiah, especially in like modern times, bro, people really worship Lenin.
Oh yeah. It's not called Marxism Leninism for no reason, you know?
Yeah, Lenin's the sugar daddy.
Marx would be more like the Judaism in this situation, where it's like the foundational base that it came from, and then you could say Lenin's more the Christianity that built upon it.
If you wanted to
religious terms like this,
keep using the religious metaphors,
which is so funny that they have to stretch it this far to make a political ideology a religious ideology. It's so bizarre.
True is just religious thinking masking itself as scientific. Basically, every ideology is based off an irrational claim masking itself as immutably true. Liberalism is based off the claim that individual human life is the ultimate arbiter of importance.
I am a classical liberal and believer in individualism, but the basis of individualism still comes from the soul, which has no real scientific validity. Okay.
Interesting. Yeah, it's just kind of like, okay.
All right.
Something with no scientific validity, an individual human's intense need for community, sex, and social validation.
Which is funny because it's like, why would you criticize in your own interpretation of how communists think? Why would you criticize communists for being religiously, religious zealots for Marx and everything? If you're literally going to appeal to a non-confirmable soul as the basis of your political ideology.
He's contending that Marxists are religious and have kind of a religious irrationality, but they lie about having it. Whereas he fully embraces it. Because that's the contention.
Okay, that's weird.
Humanists often talk about a human race, but this too really is a fiction. The human race has never acted or really existed. Individuals and groups have, but give me a single time the human race has done anything. Even the UN as representation of the various interest groups involved rather than the total human race.
Oh, I guess not all humans participated in that, so we won't count it.
Sorry, this is
if all the members of a group don't do one thing altogether, then that group does not exist.
How he was saying you need to be manly and prepared for war, and how the U.S.
It's actually a fair point.
To prepare for wars with Germany and Japan around the turn between the 19th and 20th centuries. This was portrayed as bad and a sign of toxic masculinity, which I just find amusing. This was since Teddy Roosevelt...
Toxic masculinity did not, as a concept, did not exist in the fucking late 1800s.
But I think he's saying people nowadays interpret that as toxic masculinity.
He said it was taken. Take it back. He said it was taken as toxic masculinity.
The human race has done anything. Even the UN as representation of the various interest groups involved rather than the total human race. Number 6. Pain and force are the worst things possible. Sorry, this is going to be a long one. I was once in a gender studies class. We were reading about Teddy Roosevelt.
Oh, okay.
How he was
You're
saying
right.
Men should be manly and prepared for war, and how the U.S. should build up its navies to prepare for wars with Germany and Japan around the turn between the 19th and 20th centuries. This was portrayed as bad and a sign of toxic masculinity, which I just find amusing. This was since Teddy Roosevelt was, by all accounts, right. If the U.S. didn't build up its navy and become a military
a world where the U.S. never intervenes in the world wars. He's also citing this. Don't forget, please, chat. Don't forget he is citing this as evidence that he is correct. His own interpretation of events in world history, his own alternate history videos is evidence. We can take this guy completely seriously.
So I wonder if you think... Oh, go ahead.
I'm just looking at this because this is Germany It's funny that why does he say the world wars? There wouldn't have been more than one if there was just the one and Germany won, or what were the isn't the Axis? What was it called in World War
The Central
One?
Powers.
The Central Powers. Thank you. If the Central Powers won, there wouldn't have been a Second World War, the same way that we had it. So you'd have to invent wholesale another world war to say world wars.
And you could tell that Germany or the Central Powers win World War I because
Austria-
Austria-Hungary still exists, and so does the Ottoman Empire.
And Germany's big as shit.
So I wonder how the Second World War ends up happening. Also, Japan once again conquering China.
How? How?
They couldn't do it in real life.
I don't understand, man. I hate this narrative that like Japan and Germany are these fucking powerhouses that just like swept through and destroyed all the nations around them. And it's like the biggest one that Japan did was China, and that's because China was like a huge agrarian society and Japan was like modernizing fast. The Chinese were not able to catch up with the Japanese by the time the war began.
And then they took a decent amount of territory at first, but just like Germany going into the Soviet Union, once the war bogged down, they stood no chance.
Yeah.
Like I said, when Japan decided to attack America, they were already losing the war in China. And the reason that they attacked America is because America had embargoed their oil, and they needed oil in order to fund the war in China, fuel their tanks and their logistics vehicles and shit. And they didn't have any natural oil themselves, and America being like one of the biggest exporters of oil, they definitely weren't going to get it from the Soviets. So they had no fucking oil, and they were running low. So what their idea was to essentially bomb Pearl Harbor and take out the U.S. Navy and kind of scare them into ending the oil embargo. And it failed miserably. It failed miserably. But it's like, they already were not winning against China. There is not, at least in my mind, a feasible alternate history where Japan actually takes over all of China. It's just not going to happen. They weren't winning already. They were losing.
It's so silly.
Same thing with Germany. Germany and the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union like repelled the invasion. Just straight up, they repelled it. They were caught off guard, lost a shit ton of territory. Really fast, and then the second the war bogged down, in like literally a year, the tide turned, and the Soviets just pushed them back. Because the Germans, like, they could not have won World War II even if they wanted to. Well, I mean, they did want to, but they could not even if they like got rid of Hitler or went for Moscow or any of the other alternative bullshit, because they just did not have the industrial capacity to wage a war against the Soviet Union for longer than a year.
It's also kind of funny. I was thinking, you can really tell he's like a lines on map kind of guy, because I guess he feels like every single war is always just a war of expansion and territorial acquisition. Because if you look at all of his alternate history maps, it's always like X country takes over this territory and just gets really, really big. And it's like,
well, yeah, that's how it works in the video games.
Yeah, that is. That's how it works in all of his video games that he plays.
That's how history works. Have you ever played EU4 or Hoi 4 or CK2? That's history. When the color on the map changes from gray to green, history happens.
That's fucking crazy, man.
20th century, and if American men weren't ready for war, Germany and Japan would have won and the world would be a much worse place.
No, they wouldn't have. No, they absolutely would not have.
Think about the American.
That's such a joke.
Violence freed millions of slaves whose masters were willing to fight to the death to prevent it. Pacifism effectively gives all the cards to the unscrupulous who will use force to game the system. The West spent a huge amount of its social capital in World War I. On a millennium's worth of religion, national identities, and beliefs about honor and duty were spent in a 4-year period by getting millions of men to die to barely move a front a few miles in the West, fought between countries that were basically similar, all things considered, and at roughly the same moral level. However, the effect of this is that concepts like honor, duty, higher purpose, order, and the like are viewed with cynicism in the modern world. This connection might not make sense now, but if you look at the modern...
I don't think that happened in World War I. I don't know if you know this, but like after World War II happened, all of those ideas were like still there, and people were like honoring like American veterans and Allied veterans, and the Soviet Union was honoring their veterans. They were like these great heroic people who repelled the aggressive invader, yada yada yada. Everyone was real happy. I think what turned the tide against the military in the U.S. at least is Vietnam, because Vietnam was highly publicized and everyone hated it. And then the military got a whole bunch more support again. And when I say the military, I'm including things like honor and duty and all that, because that's the shit that the military loves to promote.
Oh yeah, it is.
It's a part of their image. So the next time that happens is during 9/11, when we get all scared and warmongery and we go invade another country. And then that kind of fell apart because because we found out that the whole reason we invaded was a huge lie and they had nothing to do with 9/11 and we were just going after their oil. Like, I think that has more to do with it than World War I, to be honest, my guy. And then, yeah, I'm pretty sure Europe was pretty devastated after suffering 2 world wars. So I'll give you that one. Europe's attitude changed. America's did not.
If anything, it got worse.
Yeah, honestly, it got worse. World War II invigorated us.
It really did.
World War I was like 200,000 people died. But we kind of got to set up a bit of a world order. Woodrow Wilson, he was helped involved in the League of Nations. I can't fucking speak right now. Jesus Christ.
I think a perfect example of this is the culture of safety. Lots of younger people here grew up in a world where they couldn't play outside due to the infinitesimally small chance of a kidnapping. Or think of how we make playgrounds
Citation?
more safe.
Yeah, what?
Boring, to prevent the small chance of a child getting moderately hurt. Like, that's the end of the world. This extends to
Citation?
an emotional basis, where we're practically breaking our society to not offend people. Hunting is another perfect example of this. Hunting's taboo among large parts of the population, which is strange since most of those
Citation?
and those animals are almost always slaughtered in far less humane.
I have not met a single person who thinks hunting's taboo. I mean, if we're just using our fucking own personal anecdotes here.
Permeates our entire society.
I think it's mostly just like trophy hunting.
Yeah, people don't like trophy hunting. Which is pretty reasonable because, like, what the fuck is hunting for if not you're like trying to, actually get something out of the animal?
Yeah.
Why are you just going out and killing something for, like, oh, I'm gonna hang its antlers on my wall?
Exactly, because if you have a society of people who, like, mostly, I don't say mostly, a lot of them will just, like, eat meat. They just eat meat because that's what you do. They won't really have an issue with you hunting animals for meat because, like, that, they kind of understand why people need to hunt animals for meat. That's where meat comes from. It's really stupid.
I like I said, I've not met a single person. I mean, he just said that, he's just going to throw that out as an anecdote, so I'm going to throw my own one out. I've not met a single person who thinks hunting's taboo. I've met people who say they won't go hunting themselves because they don't like the idea of it, but no one who thinks that, like, no, you should not hunt. That is taboo.
Like you're a bad person and that hunting's like a bad thing to do.
Never met anyone like that.
Yeah, no, I can like agree with you about there's people out there who definitely don't want to like participate in hunting. They don't want to hunt the animal themselves, but they don't have anything against hunting generally.
Yeah, I mean vegans do, obviously, like animal rights activists, but like he's making it seem like the majority of the, like he just said, I believe he just said the majority of the population thinks hunting is taboo.
Yeah, I think he did say that.
What the fuck? No, they don't.
Let's see. The West's fear of waging real wars has caused remarkable amounts of harm in the last century. No one critiques U.S. involvement in Korea. Yes, they do.
I do.
But it was, for all intents and purposes, the same as Vietnam, which was also fucking terrible.
Yeah, but that's actually a true statement.
The U.S. pulling out of Vietnam on the verge of winning? They were not winning. As it was, killed millions due to the repression in Southeast Asia.
What?
What?
Citation?
Yeah, actually, though? What? Although whether the U.S. invasion of Iraq was justified is complex, it was not.
No, it's not. It was not
complex
justified.
at all. It's not justified whatsoever.
They literally lied to the American people in order to get us into that war. Like, provably lied about it. They said they had credible intelligence showing that Saddam definitely had weapons of mass destruction and that he was an imminent threat to the U.S., and he did not. And they lied about that. They never had credible intelligence. It's a known lie. What the fuck are you talking about? The U.S. pulling out before it should have resulted in the creation of ISIS and Iranian influence. So the U.S. should have stayed in those countries and occupied them longer, because those people loved it so much. That's why they were hugging the United States Army, and giving them flowers and thanking them for their. Oh no, they were blowing them up with IEDs. That's right. They were constantly trying to kill us, because they just wanted us there so much.
I guess so. What does this say? France and Britain's inability to remilitarize in the 1930s caused World War II?
What?
France
How?
and Britain's inability to remilitarize in the 30s caused World War II. Weakness breeds death.
Is he saying because France and Britain were too scared of another war that they didn't stop Hitler from remilitarizing and taking Austria and shit? Is that where that sentiment's coming from?
I guess so. That's really the only thing I can really think of. It's like, let's see. That's so dumb, man. Oh my god. Also, I really want to know what he means by the millions killed due to repression in Southeast Asia. Are you talking about like the Khmer Rouge?
Because that was Cambodia.
Yeah. Because like
Vietnam invaded Cambodia in order to stop that genocide. So not really sure where that's coming from. I don't know. I don't know what the fuck he's talking about there. Vietnam apparently killed millions. The communist Vietnam, who invaded one country in order to stop a genocide that was happening, and then got invaded by China, and then hasn't done anything since.
I mean, I looked up in any repression after the Vietnam War in Vietnam, and all I see is re-education camps where they re-educated or imprisoned 200,000 to 300,000 former military officers, government workers, and supporters of former government in South Vietnam. But I don't see anything about
millions of deaths.
Millions of deaths. That's not even millions of prisoners. That's less than a third of a million. The U.S. has a higher fucking prison population, and they're not fucking political prisoners.
He's just talking out of his ass again. I don't know what the fuck Communist winning Vietnam killed millions in Southeast Asia. Source? I made it up. Came to me in a dream. Fuck it.
That's nuts, man.
Society.
You literally made it
can't
up.
Wage offensive wars anymore, even when winning would save more lives in a balance sheet by wiping out totalitarian regimes. A very significant percentage of healthcare spending goes to keeping alive people who will die in that year anyway. Money isn't endless, and as there are more and more elderly, we can't afford to keep doing this, and we're basically killing the future economic and demographic growth of our society by doing it.
Economic and demographic growth.
Trajectory. All of this
by
we don't find
using healthcare to fund the lives of old people so they don't die.
They should just be sacrificed on the altar of capital to keep the economy.
Sacrifice them for the economy.
I remember when the government literally went on TV and said that shit, man. That was fucking insane. Dude. I cannot believe that actually happened in my life.
It was mask off. Oh, pause this. Multi-century trans-ethnic conflicts that have sparked empires. So the Roman Empire was sparked by the Gauls. No, it wasn't. It was sparked mostly by the conquering of
what's
Carthage.
Yeah, Carthage.
Carthage basically spawned or allowed the Roman Empire to be what it was. Russia and the Mongols, I don't really see how that's multi-century and trans-ethnic.
I would say,
I guess it is multi-century. What?
What? Why are you still in Russia?
Yeah, I'm talking about. I was wondering if that is multi-century, but yeah, because the Mongols set up the Golden Horde, and then the Muscovites were fighting the Golden Horde for I think 200 years. So yeah, that's multi-century, trans-ethnic, I guess. America, the Amerindians, true. I can't disagree there. England, Celts and Vikings, absolutely not.
What?
Absolutely not.
The British Empire didn't start with the conquest of the Celts and Vikings. Are you kidding? Also,
they didn't conquer.
They integrated with the fucking Anglo-Saxons.
The Vikings, they integrated with the Anglo-Saxons and then were later invaded by more Vikings. And then the Celts, I will agree, they did conquer and subjugate the Celts. Totally fair.
Mm-hmm.
But that didn't spark the British Empire. The British Empire wasn't sparked. Okay, maybe you can make the argument for it, but I would say the British Empire wasn't really sparked by the colonization of Ireland, although that was like the first colony and like their example role model of what a colony was, I would say it was more sparked by the colonization of the Americas.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that.
But I mean, you could see Ireland being like the role model of what a colony would look like, being the spark. I think that's actually a fair argument to make.
If that's what his argument is.
Yeah, big if.
Spain, the Moors.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Okay, I'll let him have that one.
China, the steppe tribes.
No. China's empire was not formed because of their conflicts with the steppe tribes. China's empire was formed due to a lot of fucking consolidation by what's his face? Fuck. I forget the first Chinese emperor of the Zhao. The Zhao.
Oh, the Zhou.
The Zhou. That's what it was. Zhou. You're the one who speaks Chinese.
I know.
The Ottomans were multi-ethnic. I mean, with the Byzantines, yeah, that's fair enough. I can't really disagree with that. Macedonia, Persians, and the Illyrians? No, not really. Multi-century trans-ethnic conflict between the Persians and the Illyrian Greeks. I'm not really sure how that sparks the Macedonian Empire, because the Illyrian Greeks... What?
I was gonna say they kind of came in like after that and conquered Greece.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, because Persia is subjugating the Illyrian Greeks. The Illyrian Greeks called to the rest of the Greek kind of area to help. Persia invades, loses, and then later on tries again, also losing, and then the Greeks kind of become like really strong. But Macedon wasn't normally considered like a part of the Greek sphere at this time. When I say the Greeks, I'm talking about the ones on the peninsula, like Corinth, Sparta, Athens, those states. And then Prince Philip II of Macedon starts slowly conquering northern Greece, but I don't really see how that was sparked by the Persian Wars, unless he's saying that Greece getting rich after the Persian Wars enriched Macedon and allowed Macedon to do what they did. But I would need a citation for that.
You're not gonna get one.
And he doesn't give. Yeah, I was gonna say, and he doesn't give those.
Oh man.
And then Arabs. The Arab Empire was spawned between a multi-century trans-ethnic conflict between Greeks and Persians. How? I want to know how. I can't really comment on that one too much because I have no idea what the fuck he's referring to. I'm assuming he's referring to like the Sassanids or the Sassanid Zoroastrian Empire and the Byzantine Empire, and kind of like the Arabs carving themselves out a little chunk of the Middle East in the middle of all that. But I don't really see how the Arab Empire was sparked by the Sassanid and Byzantine conflict. I would wonder how that works. Because Muhammad fought both of them.
Yeah, you got me on that one. This is... Oh, man.
Peter Turchin has shown that all great empires were formed
by
Esto
as Poke found?
Inter-ethnic conflict
Esto as
that
Poke
forced
found.
them to develop strong
Got a new comment.
dichotomies. The struggle gave them
chat.
unity. In my personal
Some guy, I
life,
think that was a
last
fish who
week
came in
Appalachian
earlier and said that
Trail
thing
was
about the
worth
Soviet
it.
flag.
Yeah, that's
It was
Roger.
the hardest thing
That's
I ever
fish.
did, but also the most worthwhile. Once you've clawed your own toenail off with a Swiss Army knife, nearly had your neck broken by a flying branch, and caught Giardia, it puts everything else in perspective. Number 7. The world is zero sum. Wealth is exploitation. We've all heard this theory before. It's basically the foundational theory of a lot of philosophic schools today. Between the Navajo, who believe that if a man's happy and has a good life, he must have stolen it from his neighbors through magic, and the modern leftists who believe that Europe can only reach if it exploited the third world. This is a...
I mean, the idea that the West... Oh yeah, let's read this.
Oh,
the
no.
idea that the West only became wealthy through exploitation of the rest is just blatantly untrue. The West was already, per capita, the richest place in the world before the age of exploration. No citation, of course. I wonder what his citation there is, because I'm not sure how true that is. The areas of Europe, and also like the fact that they were already rich, that they already had like an advantage, doesn't mean that they didn't do the rest of what they did and got like even richer.
Yeah.
Because it's undeniable that colonization and the exploitation of the third world by the Western colonial powers greatly profited and greatly enriched beyond anything else the Western world.
And then I'm also going to make the same argument for his next point as well.
The areas of Europe that had the least colonial endeavors, like Germany and Scandinavia, are now the richest, while Spain and Portugal, who had much larger empires, are much poorer. This is also true inside nations too. The parts of Britain and France that industrialized were not those with colonial money. So what were you going to say?
I was going to say the same thing. Like, it's weird how he says this argument that, like, Spain is poor now, so obviously Spain didn't benefit from colonialism. Yes, it fucking did.
It had a massive empire. It conquered like half the world.
Why are you going to go, these countries didn't benefit from colonialism? Because look at it now, 200 years after its empires collapsed. It's poor. And it's like, well, no shit, its empire collapsed. Look at it when its empire was still around and it was still prospering. That's how you can tell if it was doing good.
And what you'll notice is if you look at that, a lot of Spanish wealth during the empire goes into Central Europe because they're paying debts. They're using the colonial gold and shit to pay debts to the Germans for like loans in previous wars that they owed them and shit, which results in Central Europe, Germany and Scandinavia getting enriched through colonization. They're still literally benefiting from what the Spanish colonial project was doing. It's a direct benefit. The same thing in Britain. The only reason that Britain had the capital and resources in order to industrialize the way it did was, one, because of the massive amount of coal that they had inside their own territory, and also because of the massive benefits they got from the resource exploitation of the rest of the world, and through colonization.
3. After European powers left their colonial empires, large parts of those empires, such as most of Africa, saw massive economic declines, while Europe's economy saw massive growth after giving up their colonial empires.
That's because the empires never actually went away. They just stopped directly managing them. But continued to exploit them through neocolonialism. You can think of predatory bank loans from the IMF as being a really good example of this. The ones that are predicated on full economic reforms.
It's so funny. He's like one of those guys that's like, well, they stopped having their empire on paper, so the empire's gone.
Yeah, they stopped having direct military rule over these countries and just started meddling with them from the shadows.
Britain didn't even get rid of their empire. They just renamed it to the Commonwealth.
Yeah, they did keep a lot of their imperial territory.
They still have the Queen as head of state in Canada and fucking Australia. Where's another one? New Zealand?
Yeah, it's Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and then all of the minor Bahamas and shit.
Mm-hmm. The little islands.
Yeah.
Popular belief. The truth is that wealth is generated, not shared. Take this YouTube channel. I could have lied on my ass all day doing nothing, but I instead invested countless hours into making this and doing
wealth
research.
Is generated,
and the world
not
as a total
shared.
Has become a richer place. If you wanted to divide this YouTube channel among the proletariat, it would immediately lose all value because it would lose the main thing that gives it value.
But you can do both. Those aren't mutually exclusive.
Take that back. I need to hear what he. I need to hear that again. That was fucking weird.
Countless hours into making this and doing research, and the world as a total has become a richer place. If you wanted to divide this YouTube channel among the proletariat, it would immediately lose all value because it would lose the main thing that gives it value. Me.
Who would want to do that?
Also, you completely misunderstand what redistributing the means of production means. Your channel is not a means of production, and I really doubt that you're exploiting, at least when this was made, that you're exploiting anybody else's labor for your own enrichment.
No, he's doing this off of his own labor.
Yeah, so at the most you'd be petty bourgeois, and you're not really enriching yourself off the exploitation of others.
That's what I mean. Is no one wants to redistribute your YouTube channel to the proletariat.
Yeah, that's not how that works.
No one cares.
That's so silly. I can't believe he actually said that.
That the world has 4 times as many people as it did in 1930, and everyone is much richer and better fed, since we've had massive advances in technology, agriculture, and capitalism. This has been a major issue in modern economics.
Gotta tack that on there.
I know, I was thinking that too.
Now due to class warfare, but because the amount of money you make is based off where you are in the value-added chain, and we've outsourced the middle-level value-added jobs to China and Indonesia, there's more competition for the lower-level value-added due to women entering the workforce, immigration, and population growth. In the information revolution, has allowed insane degrees of productivity from the elite. This isn't to say that.
Are you suggesting all those things as bad things? Women entering the workforce?
Well, yeah, he was, because it's expanding the lower class and wiping out the middle class. That's really where it seems like he's going. Is he's like the women should never have entered the workforce. We'd have more jobs. We shouldn't automate anything. It should all still be manual hand work so we can have more jobs. It's like, or we could, kind of stop trying to do everything for profit. That'd help.
And use our massive tools and resources in order to provide for the common good.
See, because it's really funny that like automation is only really a bad thing in a capitalist society because it eliminates jobs and it's also expensive for the capitalist. But in a socialist society, automation would be an amazing thing because then that cuts down on labor time and people have more free time. We don't need to toil as hard anymore. We can save
There's less
time.
work to do.
There's less work to do, and then that means we get to do whatever the hell we want.
Yeah, I forget the guy who said it, but there's a quote from somebody, whoever ended up saying it, that really encapsulates that idea. That's like when a new piece of technology that comes out halves the amount of labor required to like make its shirt, a capitalist will fire half of his workers and make the rest of the workers, work the same amount of hours and save money through the process, right? Because he doesn't have to pay half of his workers anymore. A non-capitalist, a socialist in this case, someone who wants to provide for the common good, cuts the workday in half.
Because the people don't need to work that hard.
Because they don't need to work as hard. You have a tool that makes it easier, so don't work as hard. It's simple. In either case, production stays at the same level.
Yeah. It's crazy,
it's just
man.
It's just about where you want or how you want things to be distributed, how your society thinks it should be run, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
We should endeavor to change that, but really dividing anything like it's a pie while ignoring how it's produced is a recipe for disaster and complete failure. Philosopher, economist, and sociologist Thomas Sowell.
It's a good old quote from Kropotkin where he says, "You can't determine everybody's part in producing a thing, so trying to assign a value to everybody's part in it is like kind of incoherent." Because
you can't really do it.
You think about the chain of production of something like a pencil, and it's like, obviously you can't calculate who did the most work in that whole chain. You can't calculate everybody's addition to the value of that pencil. So why even bother? Just divide it evenly. Everybody gets the same amount of shit.
It's a theory called the open and closed views of the world. People with the open view hold that if something's wrong in the world, it must be someone's fault. Humanity and the world are naturally good, and we just need to remove oppressive structures to reach our full potential. The closed view, meanwhile, holds the world as a naturally...
I don't think anyone thinks that.
To see why there's poverty, repression, etc.
The argument is usually we could be doing better than we are now. We are currently doing very poor, and we could be doing much better if we reorganized and restructured in these certain ways and made our goals, certain things.
But that would be communism.
Of course.
See. Examples of the open view. This college club is overwhelmingly male due to the patriarchy, which we must deconstruct. This African nation is poor due to European exploitation. We ought to demand reparations from our former colonial power and remove European influence from our society. Examples of the closed view. This college club is overwhelmingly male due to inherent physiological differences between men and women in the demographics of the college. That's funny. This African nation is poor due to bad soil quality, horrifying tropical diseases, and are still transitioning from a tribal to market bureaucratic social system. Hey, where did that market bureaucratic social system come from?
What caused that? And do you think the history of them being resource exploited has anything to do with why their soil is bad and there's like environmental issues? You don't think that has anything to do with the the 200 years of exploitation and resource extraction?
No, those are unrelated. Those don't factor into to anything that happens modern day. You can't look at all those old past problems. You have to move forward into the future, and you have to look at things as they are now. We can't keep looking back into the past because the past is over. It totally doesn't have a ripple effect on everything.
Like demographics, geography, etc. to explain it. We need impersonal institutions to uphold our current level of civilization and not let it collapse. This is basically the extension of the zero-sum worldview into philosophy, that there's a set amount of unfairness in the world that we have to remove, rather than unfairness being the norm that we have to work with and it's constantly multiplying. Number 8. Humans are purely material. Brasilia, Brazil's new capital, was a scientifically designed city in the 1950s. Everything was made to be perfect. There was a mammoth command center and then suburbs designed for the housing. Everything.
But they forgot recreation.
It was perfect for every reason except one. It was inhabited by real human beings, not ants. Brasilia's obsessive official building system couldn't account for the actual population that showed up, which crowded into slums far away from the city center. If the builders had more flexibility, they would have tried to legally account for this population that appears in every major Brazilian city, or just let them put the slum nearer to the center for an easier commute. Brasilia had no...
It sounds like they should have just made more houses.
Yeah.
And thus Brasilia is known for being a horrendously boring city that you never want to move to unless you work for the government. The compartmentalization of work and home has given Brasilia the reputation of being a depressing place to live with no sense of community.
Oh, it's a good capitalist. That sounds like a capitalist design city, dog.
That sounds like literally every city in America.
Also, yeah.
It's a depressing place you don't want to live because there's nothing to do and everything sucks.
And all you do is just work and go home.
Nice case there, buddy.
Rational basis. We're emotional tribal creatures. Look at the decline in civic participation in modern America, for example, with harsh declines in every form of social engagement between bowling leagues, marriages, church attendance, voting, house parties, in-work friendships, etc.
Yeah, why do you think all of this
massive
is?
Rises in suicide, depression, declines in birth rate. And
yeah. Why do you think all of this is? What could it possibly be?
Work and then go home and watch TV or scroll through Instagram. The modern world is obsessed with the material, often to the detriment of the emotional and social.
It's not materialism, it's money.
Yeah.
It's
money. The modern capitalist model, yes. Yes, he's mentioning it. He's mentioning the issue.
I love this. On the other hand, making large sacrifices for slightly higher wages makes sense when wages suck and they're stagnant like they are. But it's like, yeah, so it's clearly this economic system that's causing these issues, wouldn't it not be? Because
no, it's an obsession with materialism.
We all need money to survive. People don't really like work 2 jobs because they want like a ton of money to go spend on whatever they want. It's usually because they literally need to work those jobs in order to pay all their bills so they don't get out, put out on the street and die.
Yeah.
If we didn't have to do that, things would probably be a lot better. We wouldn't have to work 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week. Plus, because there's tons of people who work way more than that in order to get their bare minimum met. That wouldn't have to be the norm if things weren't, pursued for profit. We didn't have to do all these garbage, literally doing nothing jobs like paperwork, Excel spreadsheets and shit like that nobody reads. All of that is work that no one actually benefits from and that could be far more useful somewhere else.
Yeah.
But
we have the means to, but we just don't want to organize that way.
No, because it's apparently it's not possible. It's just not possible, guys.
Look at popular culture, which, unlike practically any era of history, eschews really any moral compass except for harm that we mentioned before, for money. Culture really matters. Anyone who's worked with people from different countries or even different subcultures of the same country knows this. We can even quantify how much culture does matter. For example, in the 1970s, the Italian central government gave equal amounts of money to different regional governments, and we saw the results, with the South scoring far higher than the North on measures that demonstrate corruption, wastage, ineffectiveness, and inefficiency. This was also correlated with the measures above, with the North having higher amounts of people in social clubs, people working in larger companies and having more friends, or to say it differently, a more cohesive and trusting society. We find this in wars with historian Dupuy.
How is that a fault of the culture, though? You didn't really link those two things together.
No, you just said that this happened in the North and then this happened in the South. Must have been culture.
Must have been culture.
Must have been culture.
Didn't find. He also said we can directly quantify this too, and then didn't provide any quantities of anything. He just said, look at this thing they did in the 70s, not linked to culture whatsoever.
Yeah, these two places had cultural differences. So obviously the differences in the way that the money was distributed can only be attributed to culture.
I guess so. That's the only option available.
That's it.
What a joke.
Having made the calculations on troop and weapons level, came to the conclusion that the Germans in World War II were 45% more effective due to intangible cultural and leadership variables than the British. This would mean that
sounds like a bunch of bullshit. What the fuck? How do you even quantify that?
More men with the same technological level as the Germans. Number 9. The truth doesn't exist. Islam used to be the